All right, I think we are live. So welcome everyone to another Matt Maran Motoring live stream here on the Matt Maran Motoring YouTube channel. Hope you're all having a great weekend. Thanks so much for stopping by. Sorry for being a few minutes later than usual here. But like all the other usual live streams, we're going to go for about 2 hours or so. I'll give priority answering to anyone who has a super chat or a super thanks, as well as anyone who's a member there with their main usernames. They always get that priority answering. If you'd also like that, there's always a link in the description to join in. And so let me see. I got a bunch of people who have already joined in. Thanks so much for waiting, everyone. So we have Still Buster, Danny, Kraken, Kevin, Lancewath, Wheatman, Anthony, Vishal, and OK Spacist, and Lancewath, Luke, Darnell, and so thanks so much, everyone. Also, I'm continuing with having the window open here tonight, so you hear some nice and nighttime ambient noises here while we chat. Hopefully you don't mind. And Still a Buster says, hey, all, lots of car spots this week. Seen a yellow Chevy Chevette. Nice. A red 99 F-150 SVT Lightning. Very cool. 2 Aston Martin DBXs, 1 green and the other blue, a DeLorean, and a Ferrari Roma. Wow, that is quite the spotting you've had this week. Congrats, that's awesome. And Danny also says, hello, I drove alone on Wednesday and drove yesterday and today. I was the person to put the Bolt up to 75,900 miles. Rare spot was yesterday, and it was a really rare Mazda Navajo. I forgot about those. Other one was a 2003 Ford Explorer Eddie Bauer. Black with the 10 accents outside that had the V8 badge on it. Very nice. Yeah, my spots here the past few days, I saw a Magnum. It made me think of Trucking Car Guy. I saw a Magnum that was all black, had a mild lowering spring kind of setup on it, but not crazy. And it was like the refresh version with the more boxy kind of headlights, and had RT badges on it and sounded really nice, and just a nice blacked out Magnum. That's cool because I very rarely see Magnums, especially nice ones these days. So that was cool. Saw a McLaren 570S the other day. And what was the other cool thing that I just saw recently? I just saw it today too. I'm blanking on it now. But yeah, I've been seeing some cool stuff. If the other one comes to me, I'll let you guys know. But hope you guys also had some good spots. I see Kraken says he hopes my weekend was good. It was. We had a busy weekend here. We had a fun party we went to yesterday, and today we went to a Pittsburgh Pirates game, which is always fun. So it was a good weekend for us here, and hope yours was good too, Kraken and everyone. And Kraken also says, got to check out the new F1 arcade in Philly. Absolutely loved it, including racing on the Sims. That's awesome. I didn't know that was a thing. That's very cool. He says, got some time to chill out, heading back for my friend's whose birthday was Wednesday. That's awesome. I hope he had a great birthday. And let me see. So Lancelot says, good evening. And my spots for the latter part of the week are a white BMW X6, a mini convertible, and a PT Cruiser convertible. That's fun. Wheatman, thanks for stopping by. And Kraken as well saying happy Sunday evening, crew. And let me see. Also says, I'm going to get this off the bat. My spot of the week was a Yugo convertible. Interesting. Me and my friend at first thought it was a Rabbit. That's Did they make a Yugo convertible? Maybe, I don't know if B. Mitchell's in here, but if not, I mean, that's, I didn't think that was a thing. Maybe it's a custom job. That's fun. Very cool spot. Also, Lancelot, thanks so much for gifting 5 memberships here. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone, a bunch of people there, familiar faces, able to get those. So that's awesome. And thanks so much for your generosity, Lancelot. And YH, thank you so much for the first super chat of the night. He says, grabbed an M440i, gapped an M440i, an S5, and a Scat Pack. Raced an RS5, and that thing was fast, but I caught up to it and just edged it out. Go Blue Jays. Nice. Yeah, I don't pay attention to baseball. Honestly, we went to the game, but I'm so out of the loop. We saw, I think Paul Kanies or something. I can't even remember how to say his name, but one of our best pitchers was out there today. But I'm so out of the loop on all of that. It's just kind of a fun hangout time. I enjoy the game and the sport of it, but the Pirates, unfortunately, are just not rewarding to follow. So I'm just completely disconnected, unfortunately. But yeah, glad you had some fun there, Etch. And let me see. So other questions here and comments. Anthony says, hey, all, nothing too crazy this weekend with the exception of a heavily modified 911 Turbo S. It sounded and looked pretty crazy. It was a deep purple color with gold wheels. That's a cool combo, purple and gold. That's awesome. And Vishal says hello and says, my spot tonight was an Aventador SVJ Roadster. Very nice. That's a rare beast too. That's for sure. It sounded great. The OKS basis says, happy Sunday. He saw a white Buick Encore GS Avenir and thought, that's nice looking. Does that mean I'm old now? I think they've done a good job with the Avenires, and they have some really nice, pretty colors for them. I really like that, like metallic sky blue they do on those. But yeah, I think it's okay to like some Buicks. My father-in-law, he always jokes about that because he has a Tour X Buick. He's like, oh, I'm the old guy driving a Buick now, but it's a really cool Buick. So it's doesn't seem like a bad move to appreciate a Buick. But Danny says, can't stay on here for long. Got to go help out at my high school's freshman orientation tomorrow. Got to be at the school at 9 a.m. when orientation is at 10. That's awesome. Well, yeah, totally understand, and hope you have a good week here. And it's awesome you're able to help out. That's great of you. And let me see. Last one says, looks like you just like a good looking vehicle there with a Buick. And Luke says, I saw an 08 to 2014 WRX hatchback, a 2008 or newer Lancer wagon hatch, and a Cobalt SS driving as a group. Nice, fun little cruise here. Hopefully on the weekend. That's great. I miss doing those cruises with other enthusiasts. Hopefully I have the time to get back into that someday. And Danny says, got my first day of school in about 2 weeks. We start September 3rd. I know kind of late, but we start on depending what Labor Day falls. That's nice that you still actually go back after Labor Day. That's the way it used to be. But around here, especially, it's way earlier. Typically, they kind of threw that thing out the window. And Luke says, turning 30 yesterday is surreal. It does not feel like a decade has passed. That's crazy. Yeah, well, happy 30th birthday. Welcome to the club. It's the 30s are obviously I started the 30s in 2020, so it's been a wild ride just this decade in general. But hope 30 is great for you, and congrats on the new milestone. And hope you had a great birthday as well and had a fun celebration. And Darnell says, Labor Day is next weekend. Woo, get this summer weather out of here. Yeah, it's really changing over fast here. I don't know about you guys where you live, but like here, it's going to be like mid to low 70s. It looks like for the foreseeable future, pretty much. Today was like the last day over 80. Maybe that will rebound and change, but it seems like we're like a month ahead of schedule, which is kind of the way I've been feeling this whole year. It seems like, we had a really short winter and like spring started up like basically in March, which is pretty unusual for us. And like all the storms that usually happen in June seem to happen in May this year, all the crazy, like intense storms and stuff. And now it seems like we're getting fall, 3 or 4 weeks early. I'm hoping this means that we actually have a nice snowy Christmas. We'll see. But it's been interesting how the weather's been a little bit ahead of schedule this year for some reason. And we see Lancelot says he turned 50 this year. That's awesome. Some days I feel like a 3,000-year-old mummy that's being exhumed. Yeah, I feel like I can kind of relate some days waking up in the morning, and I'm only 35, but just feeling exhausted, especially parenthood sometimes can do that to you. Not a lot of sleep or, being up in the middle of the night or whatever, but, it's only a number still, as long as you try and focus on, feeling young, hopefully, combined with, healthy food and exercise, you can keep on feeling young regardless of the age. And Danny says, I'm going to be turning 18 this coming March. I know some of you can't believe 2008 was almost 18 years ago. Yeah, that is very crazy because I graduated in 08 from high school. So yeah, that's pretty wild for me. And let me see here. Lancelot says 1985 was 18 years ago, wasn't it? Right. Yeah. It's crazy how time flies. And let me see. Michelle says, thoughts on all the upcoming Nissan stuff. Xterra return, Pathfinder QX60 moving to BOF, a platform, Q50 coming back with potentially a manual. It all sounds promising. Yeah, so I've been catching some of the bits and pieces of that. I hadn't heard all the details. Unfortunately, I've been kind of a little bit behind on the news here this week, but I did see that Q50 I saw automotive news reporting it. I don't know if it's confirmed or if it's just a speculation piece. But they were saying that Q50 returning essentially as a four-door Z is kind of the gist I got of 400 horsepower twin turbo V6 from Z, the manual from Z, probably the same automatic option of the 9-speed there as well. And I hadn't heard about Pathfinder. That would make a lot of sense to go buy on frame though. And Xterra, obviously, that's something they should have never quit making. Honestly, they should have always kept that going. But that all sounds fantastic to me, and it just again, I really do have faith in Nissan that they're on the right path, and meeting people where they want to be met. Instead of trying to say this is what people should want, they're saying what do people actually want. And I think even if these things aren't maybe objectively the best way, depending on how you feel about it, I think it's just, trying to differentiate themselves from everybody else. And also just, if everyone says this is what they want is body on frame everything, then give them body on frame everything and give it a try, Same thing with Q50. Like, obviously, I'm sure there were people of the last generation that wanted a manual. And now they're like, okay, sure. Well, let's do the manual. And, maybe only 5 people will actually buy it. But they're, trying it out, and I got to commend them for the bravery. And I think that hopefully, again, stuff like, kicks being fantastic, which, by the way, they revealed pricing for 2026 kicks, and it's still like starting at, 22 and change before destination. It's like phenomenal. They're keeping that price low, and same thing, with Leaf, starting at 30 grand here. I think they're really on the right path. So I'm excited for their future. Hopefully they get there because, I'm still kind of fuzzy about the financing of Nissan and, the reports that they maybe didn't have a ton of time to live. So I hope that all those things actually materialize and that they make it to that point. And again, hopefully the stuff that they already have, on sale or coming here in the next couple of months, like Leaf and, again, like Kicks, I think is still selling really well. Hopefully those types of things kind of keep them afloat until this other awesome product comes to be money printers, especially that Xterra. I'm sure that'll be a great money printer for them. So I'm excited, for sure. And let me see. Helio, thank you so much for the super chat. Apologies for making you wait a few minutes here. He says, your thoughts on the reliability of either the G37X or Q50 all-wheel drive. Looking to trade my 06 TSX. Don't want to spend more than 15 grand. Love all your content. Well, thank you. I'm glad you like the content, and thanks so much for the super chat and for watching the channel. As far as reliability, they both seem pretty good, especially for Q50. If you're talking about the V6, the regular non-turbo naturally aspirated V6 they had in the early years of Q50, that especially, it's a known quantity. I mean, all of these motors have been around for a while now, but the simpler, the better, in my opinion. So I think, V6 in Q50 is great. And it's, basically shared with G37 as well. So I think that's, probably the safest bet. Once you go into the turbo Q50s, those I think are mostly fine. I don't know enough about those long term. And I think, the one thing with the VQ motors, they do like to burn oil eventually. So just, it's a matter of staying up on maintenance, finding one that's been maintained well. Those are kind of the important things to, make sure that you have, good records, whichever one you're buying, so that, it is going to be, a well taken care of example. But between the two, G37 is great, and it is lighter than Q50, but I think Q50, obviously it has its shortcomings as well with, the infotainment and stuff, but I really think Q50 is, a little bit roomier. It's the next generation. So if it were between a really mint G37, which is probably really hard to find anyway, I think you have better luck, better chances of finding a, modified Q50 than you do a G37. So I would probably lean towards Q50. And the regular V6 ones are great. I reviewed one way back when. You can look up my review of the non-turbo Q50. Still great, fun car, sounds great, still plenty of power. And I think that's probably the way I would lean. But beyond just the motor, I think everything else should be mostly fine. I haven't heard of a lot of issues, but anything like this, I'm not going to be the best source of information because I don't stay up to date on every single car of the past 25 years and how they're doing. So you definitely want to go to like a G37 or Q50 subreddit Facebook group, forum. Those are the places where you're going to get the best info from real owners that are, racked up hundreds of thousands of miles in these cars. They're going to be the ones. A lot of forums even have like a sticky, at the top of, here's the common problems and concerns with these cars. Here's what to look out for. So that's going to be the best source of information for sure. But yeah, from what I've seen, I haven't heard horror stories about either of them necessarily. But maybe there's something I missed. So definitely, and if anyone else has any info in here, feel free to share it too. Hopefully we can all contribute as well. But thank you so much for the super chat, and best of luck deciding and figuring out what you want to do. But I think both would be great upgrades from the TSX there. And Grant, thank you so much for the double super chat. I really appreciate it. I missed your other message before it was retracted, but I see he says, does Porsche not offer press cars for you? I'd love to see some Porsches on the channel. If ever in Atlanta, you're welcome to film the GT3 and quad. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for the offer. Unfortunately, Porsche does not send me press vehicles. They are one of the ones that are very hard to get. They have a very high standard and are very much, just very tough to get. So that's why you typically only see, the best of the best that get Porsche press cars. That's not something that they hand out, willy-nilly. So I'm just not at that level, unfortunately. Maybe someday the channel will get to that point. I was close to getting some because they have the sports car division and then the SUV and regular kind of stuff are kind of two separate things. I was in talks to maybe get a Macan and a Cayenne at some point. And then that kind of just ended up I didn't end up pursuing that. I should have done more to pursue it, but they kind of didn't, advance the talks. And I just was like, I'm not super confident these cars are going to get tons of views anyway. And I have access to used Porsches, from time to time. I've done a Macan Turbo, and I've done, a couple of 911s in the past and stuff. So, but I'd love to do all the new stuff because it's all phenomenal. And I'm hoping to get a chance to review those at some point. But yeah, Porsche's just, and a lot of the other car companies are actually starting to cut back. I'm not sure if I've talked about this in the past recently or not, but Mercedes used to send me press cars and they have since decided not to send me press cars. They have said that it's because they're now enforcing their mileage restriction of some of these car companies. Like I never get BMWs. It's because they have a limit of like 200 or 300 miles delivery limit. And I get all my stuff from Washington, DC typically, and sending it up to Pittsburgh is about 200 to 240 miles or so. And so for some of them, it's like, we don't want to put that many miles on it. And so that's why I've never had BMWs really on the channel, aside from a couple that strangely came from New York, which is even further, but that's a whole nother thing. It's kind of weird how the decisions get made sometimes. But so I usually don't have BMWs. But I had Mercedes for a few years, and then they now say, oh, we can't send stuff because it's too far. I don't know if that's just an excuse. Maybe they didn't like some of the bashing I was doing on some of the, reviews, or maybe it's genuinely just they're tightening their budget and they just don't want to, spend the money to send a driver 4 hours each way, to deliver a car to me. I don't know. That could go either way. I'll probably never know the truth. But the European companies do sometimes get a little apprehensive about negative commentary. I still say it regardless. And if I lose press car access, I don't care because, like I said, I can go to a dealership and get it, and I'm not going to be swayed. I'm not going to bite my tongue. But even Audi started to say, oh, we have this mileage limit. Thankfully, I reached out to my Audi rep and he was like, for you, absolutely, we'll send stuff. It's just, kind of, the rule that they have to worry about, sometimes for others. But thankfully, I'm still going to be able to get some Audis. I'm hoping to have an RS3 and to be spending a week with the S5 here soon. But it's just something I'm starting to see more of, is companies not wanting to send stuff as much. And some of the press fleets are a lot smaller. I'm still waiting on so many Fords. They used to send a lot more stuff, and now it's just kind of slow for some of their other products now and stuff. So it's just tough in general to get press cars a little bit more than it used to be, I think. But Porsche is still one I'd love to get. Them and Ferrari are the two that are famously hard. So we'll see what happens, but hopefully someday. Because I do love Porsches, and I'm sure there's shortcomings, but I'm sure it'd be a mostly positive review. But we'll see, if that ever happens. And thanks, Grants, for the other super chat there. I really appreciate it. And Hope you're enjoying the GT3 and the quad as well. And let me see here. Getting back to the other questions. Where were we here? So Danny says, I really got a slap in the face with that feeling old thing. Some of the freshmen don't know what a CD is. I feel heartbroken, yet also old. Yeah, it sounds like you just might be an old soul a little bit, and that's awesome. And Theodore, thanks for stopping by. He says, hope we're all having a beautiful day. I hope you are as well, Theodore. And let me see. Kraken says, Matt, have you done a review on the new G90 yet? I checked one out on Friday at Genesis of, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. And he said, I was left speechless. Most luxurious car I've ever been in. That's awesome. I have not reviewed the new G90. I had one offered to me. I actually turned it down because that's one of those cars. Sure, I'd love to spend a week with the G90, but no one would watch it. It's hard for me to get any kind of Genesis views, and especially on something that's almost 100 grand. For a Korean car, I could see the comments already, so I was just like, I'd love to, but I'm sorry, it's just gonna be a waste of time if I do it. So that's why I haven't reviewed the G90. I would absolutely love to spend a week with it. It seems like a phenomenal car, and I did do the prior gen G90, and that didn't really get very many views either. This new one seems, like it's really amazing though, but yeah, unfortunately I've never been in one. But yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm sure it's absolutely amazing. And Lance West says, I remember a Rabbit convertible. Yeah, definitely they had the Rabbit convertible, but I didn't know about the Yugo. And he says it had a Yugo badge on it and definitely didn't have the Rabbit front end. Interesting. Yeah, it might just be a custom thing. That wouldn't surprise me either, honestly. Zachary, thanks for stopping by and moderating. He says, yeah, Paul Skeens is the best. Thanks for spelling out his name there. Yeah, he was great. I mean, we won today. It was 4-0. It wasn't really an action-packed game, I guess partially because of the good pitching. But, we just had the one home run that cleared the bases there. That was a 3-run homer. And then there was one extra run we got there shortly after. And that was it as far as all the action for the game. It was such a fast game that, obviously with our daughter, it's a little hard to to be able to super focus in on the game. And like, I was still like going to grab lunch. So I grabbed the permane sandwich. For anyone who's familiar in Pittsburgh here, it's a sandwich with coleslaw and fries on the sandwich, which is really handy whenever you're, especially in a baseball seat. But like literally I like watched the first couple of innings, went out, got the sandwich, came back, ate that. And then it was already like the 6th inning, and like my daughter really wanted like they have the ice cream in the little hat bowl kind of thing, souvenir bowl. So we went and got that, and like by the time we'd gotten that, I was like, holy crap, it's already the 9th inning. Like the games are so much quicker now, it seems, with the new timer, which I think is good for consumability. But it's like, man, the game just like flies by. I feel like I remember as a kid, games being like so long and drawn out. Now it's just like I'm barely even like getting my bearings, and it's like, oh man, it's already over. But it was really fun. So apparently he's super good, and that was kind of cool to see him. But I'm so out of the loop that I didn't appreciate it the way I should have. Let me see. So Danny says the Yugo did have a factory convertible option. It was called the Yugo Cabrio or the GVC convertible, produced from 87 to 90. Well, thank you for the info. He says less than 100 were imported into the U.S. So, wow. So that's quite a rare spot that you had there, Kraken. That's one of 100. And I'm sure there's probably about 5 in existence, because I'm sure the other ones rusted out or, just got banged up over the years or whatever. So that's pretty cool. And thanks for the info there, Danny. And Darnell says Paul Skeens is awesome. I'm in BR, so I have an attachment to the Pirates there from his time at LSU. Oh, nice. That's awesome. Very cool. And yeah, I'm glad yeah, we'll see how long we keep him for. The thing with the Pirates, this could be a whole nother thing. But, we always, aside from in my lifetime, 2013, I mean, technically the early 90s too, but 2013 to 2015, we had our playoff years there when our owner, his stingy owner, decided to finally spend a little bit of money on the roster. But other than that, I mean, we always have these very promising people, and then we trade them away for prospects and a bunch of cash. And he's like, I swear, he's the most hated guy in Pittsburgh, Bob Nutting, the owner of the Pirates. I saw multiple shirts today, people being like, abandoned ship, Bob, like sell the team. Everything. And yeah, I think every Pittsburgher that ever cared about the Pirates just hates that guy, because he's just made it completely unentertaining ever since 2015, especially, and it's been long before that too. But anyway, I won't grind that axe anymore here. But Raphael, thank you so much for a very generous super chat. He says, I test drove an Integra Type S and it's far beyond my Camry TRD, but mine is paid off and it's hard to jump into a new payment. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll have to see what interest rates do. It sounds like they're now contemplating, dropping interest rates a tiny bit just because of the weakening job market. So, we may see that relatively soonish. And, if the Integra is still something that you want, if maybe the interest rates get a little bit better here, might sweeten the deal a little bit. But even just regardless, even if it's a really good interest rate, just I know not having a payment it's got to be very nice. So it's up to you. I mean, cars are never great financial purchases most of the time and far from being rational a lot of times as well. So it's an emotional purchase if it's something that you feel drawn to. I obviously, I love the Integra Type S. It's fantastic, and it'd be right up there if I had, 55-ish grand to spend. It'd be one of my top picks for sure. I love them a lot. So best of luck deciding. And test driving one is dangerous. So you test drive it and maybe now you're hooked. So best of luck either shaking it or finding a way to, be okay with the new payment again. But that's funny. And YH, thank you so much for another super chat. He says, did you know they call off pursuits here if you're going too fast? A gray police charger chased me, so I dropped a gear and disappeared. Man, well, hopefully they didn't catch your plate, because that's the way, at least here in the States, is it's like you can outrun a cop, but can you outrun the radio? That's kind of always the thing you're gambling on, is did they catch your plate? He says, my plate was covered. Wow, you are a wild man. That's crazy. Well, then I guess you're probably good. But they, even still, if your car is distinctive, they I mean, at least the way it works here in the States, I mean, they will still keep an eye out for you. They know who you are. I know that's the fun thing, in Tokyo Drift and stuff is the same deal. In Japan, it's like you do more than 180K, they don't chase you. And I mean, there's some good science behind that, of the statistics of when you do a pursuit, it does oftentimes make things worse in many cases, depending on who it is you're pursuing and how that all plays out. But yeah, you're playing with fire there, man. He says, I take the first exit and then the back streets. This is my turf. Just keep it safe, man. That's all I got to say. Make sure you're keeping it safe, and hopefully it's, whenever there's anyone else around or anything. Because that's, man, even like, I mean, I've done plenty of crazy speeding in my day, but like I saw that dude in blue just reviewed that like crazy 2000 horsepower street speed GTR. And that one flyby they did, it was like really fast. You can tell there's traffic around. I don't love that, honestly, these days. Personally, I've just gotten, especially being a parent and stuff, I've just, those types of things do make me nervous, because I'm like, that kind of stuff can go bad real quick when you're doing high speeds like that. And that's part of why I've shied away from doing any crazy builds or anything like that. Because I just, in addition to just, again, risking other people's lives and all that, whenever you're doing this on public roads, it's also like, I mean, there's more and more crackdowns of, people, these YouTubers getting tickets and getting jail time and stuff. And, yeah, you can blur your speedometer, but they're not idiots. Like all these people doing POV videos, the ones that blur their speeds, like the cops clearly see, especially when you start blurring at the speed limit, you are still accelerating. Like, yes, you cannot prove based on the video exactly what you're doing, but especially if it's a one cut and there is no manipulation happening to the video, I mean, they do accident reconstruction all the time. They can figure out, okay, he's passing this landmark, and then 2 seconds later, he's passing this signpost. You do the math there. It's very easy to figure out, especially if the audio isn't distorted or anything. Then you have, an audio timeline there to back up the video that this isn't being, sped up or anything. It's crazy. I mean, I've talked to the straight pipes about this as well. Talked to Yuri about, they're really getting more aggressive with the, speeding enforcement in his area. And it's like, it's just something he's not, going to be doing crazy speeding is it's just like, you have to kind of be mindful of that, especially when you're filming it. So it's maybe me getting old and getting boring, and maybe I'm less of an enthusiast as a result, but like I'm just really not about crazy speeds. And that's why in my videos, you see me do an acceleration, it's 260, and then I immediately slam on the brakes and I go, very reasonable, respectable speeds the rest of the time. And, I save the crazy driving for the track. Thankfully, I'm fortunate enough, I get with the manufacturer events, 1 or 2 events a year at least, hopefully, where I'm able to go on the track and scratch that itch and, actually use my driving skills, to their fullest extent a little bit there. But I'm pretty much, very, very conservative on the streets now. He also says I'm the only Vapor Blue GT in my town. Okay. Well, yeah. So you're really, yeah, I wouldn't be too confident about your security if you got the only car like that in town. Again, these cops are not dumb. Because it's just so fun. I always have been law abiding and don't even have a speeding or a parking ticket. It feels good to be a wolf, or should I say a coyote? I'm glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, just like I said, just always make sure you're doing it in a safe manner. But I mean, I've been there before. I have played around with cars in the past and all that. So it's it's something I understand. Also, let's see here. Back to the other questions here. Where were we? So Danny's saying that it was conceived in 87, but the production started in 90. Gotcha. Okay, cool. And Tastebud said, having a coil pack issue on my 370Z, replaced 2 already, 1 at a time. Now just replacing them all. Just keep getting misfires on old packs. Super frustrated, but needs to be done, I guess. Interesting. Well, sorry to hear that. And I guess that's another good issue there, since, again, that shares that same motor with the G37 and especially Q50, I think, for the other person here who was asking about that earlier. So that's good to know. And sorry you're having that issue, though. Hopefully it gets resolved here soon. And it sounds like you're chasing the Phantom. It's just, once you get them all done, then hopefully you won't have to worry anymore. And Luke says, I have a feeling this will be a miserable winter. Yeah, we'll have to see. It's always so hard to predict, it seems. And Danny, yes, if fewer than 500 Yugo Cabrios, fewer than 100 in the States. Okay, yeah. So other places, maybe it came in from elsewhere too, especially since it's older than 25 years. I guess you could have imported one in here after the fact that hasn't, there wasn't an original 100 there. But yeah, that's fascinating. And Zachary says, bizarre spot this week, an Isuzu Oasis, the rebadging of the original Honda Odyssey that had 4 regular doors instead of a sliding door. They barely sold 3,000 per year for like 4 years. The evening chirps out of your window are low-key relaxing. I'm glad you're enjoying it. And the Oasis is awesome. Yeah, actually, my uncle had an Oasis. I spent many a day riding around in an Isuzu Oasis. I have lots of memories of opening those doors and being like, this is the strangest minivan because it has regular 4 doors. And but it was great. He enjoyed it. I don't know why he got the Isuzu. I'm actually going to see him next week. I should ask him why he went for the Isuzu over the Honda, and then I can report back to you guys. Because I'm very curious myself how he ended up with that. He had some quirky cars though. He had a Saab. I think it was 9,000. I can't remember exactly which. I remember what it looks like, but I can't remember what it was called. If it was the first of the like earlier 9.3s or what. But but that was kind of an interesting one. Then they went for a regular Town and Country and had the regular sliding doors there. But for a while though, he had that Oasis and it treated him well. And that's an awesome spot because I haven't seen an Oasis on the streets in a long time. So kudos to you for finding that. And Tastebud says he's turning 40 next summer, and I'm currently in the best shape of my life. Don't give up. That's great to hear, and that's awesome. Yeah, I need to get into shape again too. It's something I've just been slacking on. Just again feeling overwhelmed by life and just working so much and being busy with the family and everything. But I need to get back into shape. Every time I see a Bond movie or I see some other movie where there's someone who's really in shape, I'm like, man, I need to like get back into that fighting shape. And I miss it. I used to go to the gym all the time, and It's just one of those things that just haven't made the time for, but hopefully someday soon here. And kudos to you for being in the best shape of your life at 40. That's awesome. Let me see. And Raphael, yeah, thanks for stopping by as well. And he says, and Luke also says, I got myself a Bose portable speaker at Costco yesterday. Well, that's a fun little birthday present to yourself. Yeah, that's cool. And Grant says, hi, Matt. Okay, sorry, you already asked that there in the super chat. Wyatt says, once that French company bought Nissan, their quality went downhill. I guess you mean, yeah, the merger with Renault, or it's a partnership. It was an alliance. Technically, it wasn't. I don't think they were bought out. I think it was kind of an investor. But, it's debatable. I know there's been a lot of discussion about, I think a lot of it was Gosen, and there's, apparently he's just like, people don't even want to talk about him within Nissan. It's just he damaged the company so badly in their opinion. And I think that is, partly to blame for sure, is his poor leadership and him chasing volume at the expense of quality and at the expense of brand value. Because I think it did really dilute the brand and made Nissan more of a discount company than they were before. And I think that was, because if you talk about, Nissan before 2010, for example, we're talking in the early 2000s and the 90s, they still had top-notch stuff. They were, a world player as far as, technology, and as far as I think their respect, some would probably say they were never at the level of Honda and Toyota, but I'd say they were pretty closer than they are nowadays in many ways. I think that their products right now are fantastic. Like in many cases, I think I'd rather have a Nissan over comparable Toyota or Honda in many ways, especially depending on, what you value. They're just phenomenal values these days. But I think that, it was a missed opportunity with Renault. They didn't do more sharing. I feel like there's so many other cool things they could have done. And I think, we're getting some of that, like the Nissan Micra that I don't think we're getting here in the States, but that's just basically that awesome Renault 5, which is a super hot seller, it seems, in Europe, the new electric little Renault hatchback. That is, having a Nissan version. And I think that the new Leaf does borrow some of the Renault underpinnings, but the Micra is even smaller, and I think that could be a really nice, like 20 grand EV or something. Maybe it's just too small, like everyone else. They're just like, oh, no one in America wants something this small and this low range and all that. But I think that Renault makes some cool stuff, and I'd love to see more of that come over here. It's just probably not compatible with our market, but yeah, I think Nissan's on the right path, though. Darnell says, most important thing about getting older is positive thoughts and positive actions. That's great advice. Yeah, I agree. And Kraken says, hey, Matt, I missed your answer in regards to reviewing my car in mid-October when I come down. Okay, yeah, sorry. Maybe I missed that on the last one, or maybe it was after you signed off. Definitely send me a message. I know last time you sent me a message, it just didn't work out timing-wise. Mid-October is very busy for me. I have 2 trips back-to-back, 2 weeks, where I'm going to be, filming some new reveals or new products. So mid-October is probably not going to work. I'll just say right now, we'll see. It depends on, again, how everything plays out, but most likely mid-October is going to be, October in general is usually crazy for me. And just in general, there's always tons of car things. It's also the Northeast. And so that means like October, like every weekend is jam packed with, pumpkin, picking and, apple picking and, going and getting photo shoots because of the fall, colors and doing all the fall things. It's like everyone in the Northeast, it's like, insanely busy. There's a zillion things to do for that like 3 or 4 week window when the leaves are actually nice and pretty. But yeah, let me know, send me a message. There's no harm in that. And I'll let you know if it's something that, might be able to work, but October is tough. And Vishal says Infinity version of an Xterra would be cool to take on the GX. Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. I mean, for a lot of the luxury brands, unless it's something that really dilutes the luxury brand or something that really has no business being a luxury version, I think otherwise, like everything, and Lexus is really good like this in many ways. Everything you do with a regular brand, you should have a luxury version of it, in my opinion. It's just because it's already there. And as long as you can differentiate it enough, like, why not? It's just you're multiplying your work and spreading out your investment dollars and everything else. So we'll see what they do. I certainly think Infinity would welcome something like that, though, and I think that'd be very cool to take on the GX. And even if it's smaller than GX, then it takes on. I mean, I guess there's no Lexus equivalent to the Forerunner, but yeah, I mean that could be something new that again they kind of do something different than everyone else and do something a little more impressive, and maybe that would cause Lexus to do a version of the Forerunner as well. That'd be cool. Yeah, great idea, Michelle. And 345 Navi says, I'm thinking about a Lexus GSF 2020 over a Dodge Charger RT 2023. What are your thoughts? Totally different cars as far as, yes, they're both V8 and rear-wheel drive, but they do it in completely different ways. If you want, something kind of crazy over the top, the Charger is just very extroverted as far as throttle response is super touchy. So like every time I had a Charger for a week, even the slower ones, they are so tuned with the throttle that they just want to instantly spin the tires. So I had to consciously stop myself from doing burnouts and peel outs every time I was accelerating, because it's just very easy to do in those cars. And GSF is, it has the V8 and it is absolutely about the power component, but that motor doesn't have as much torque. So you got to wring that motor out, kind of like the Coyote V8 and stuff. It's not a torquey down low kind of motor like the Charger motor is. So Lexus is all about, wringing it out. It's obviously less loud, but the GSF is a phenomenal handler. You can watch my reviews on GSF. I did a couple of them. Such an amazing handler. I mean, it'll run circles around Charger all day. Even if you're talking wide body Charger, with the biggest tires possible, a GSF would still just completely embarrass a Charger on track, I think. And so if you appreciate handling, I think GSF is absolutely the way to go. It also comes down to your personality. I think I see, it looks like you got a Charger there possibly in your little profile picture. So if Chargers are your thing, and if you like, that culture and the lifestyle of being a Charger owner, because I think it very much is kind of its own thing, and it's different than what a lot of other vehicles where they don't really have tight-knit groups like that, or it's not quite as common. At least I think it's just a very different kind of owner as well. So you're either a Charger owner that is going to be loud and proud, or I think the GSF is more of the classier kind of understated sleeper kind of approach, and again is more well-rounded. So it's more of a proper sports sedan. I think that's really the best way to condense it. GSF is a sports sedan and Charger is a muscle car. And so just differences in personality between the two of them. Both are fun in their own ways. Personally, I would go for GSF if it were me, if you have the same personality as me. But again, that's the great thing about cars is, there's something for everyone's personalities. And so it just comes down to how you feel about those. But hopefully that helps you a little bit. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions though. And let me see why it's suggesting the 370Z there. I see Joe says S85 V10s, get them while they're still cheap. I don't remember what is S85 the Audi. Is that the V10 we're talking about here? I think. I love the V10 Audis. They are super cool. And it seems like that motor is really well built. And I mean, I've seen multiple V10 Audis with over 100,000 miles still doing pretty well. And it sounds like a Lambo. I don't know if you guys knew this. I actually just learned this the other day. I always thought that it was the same engine from the Gallardo that you had in the Lambo and the Audi, but they're different. So the Gallardo motor initially was a 5-liter. It was always a 5.2 in the Audi. The Audi was actually they say the V8 Audi motor that they added 2 extra cylinders and created the motor themselves. I thought it was from Lamborghini, but it wasn't. And then I believe it's actually the other way around. Lamborghini kind of did some of their own stuff to that Audi motor, and that's the 5.2 that you see later in LP560 and then in the Huracan. But I always had thought that Audi got the motor from Lambo, and it's actually the other way around, which fun little bar trivia, I suppose. But even all these years of doing this, and I've driven a bunch of these V10s. I remember I was driving them and detailing them when they were new and they were coming into the Audi dealer I worked at. And the whole time I was like, yeah, it's a Lamborghini motor, and it's not. I think the Lambo V10 also is very reliable, partially because, again, especially for the 560 and later, they were again based on that successful Audi architecture. But I think even regular 5-liter gyros are pretty solid. So, but yeah, I agree. That's one vehicle I've never understood why they depreciated. You would think, I mean, but even you look at, I also think it's also, I don't know if the V10s from Audi have an issue with the motor like you see with the BMW high revving motors, but like it's insane to me. E90 M3s are a steal right now. I was researching them for, I think, one of the Carbos articles I was doing. You can get an E90 M3 for like 20 grand, especially if it's like around 100,000 miles, because I think that's when the one, I can't remember which component it is that like grenades the motor, but that seems to start going, around 100,000, 120,000, something in that range. And so it like dirt cheap. And I'm like, there's no way E90 M3s are going to be sitting at 20 grand for much longer. Surely people are going to come to their senses. And I mean, it's a fixable part. There's aftermarket companies that do that part properly. It's just that it's a bunch of work to put that new part in. But I'm like, I feel like I'm like, how are people possibly sleeping on these high revving V8 M3s and also by extension the M5 with the screaming V10? And they're all like relatively cheap. And it's like one of the last few bargains out there, I think. Also those Audi V10s, some of the last few bargains out there in the collecting world, where surely these things are going to be big money someday because they're the high watermark for those cars. I still think they haven't outdone the E92 M3. Obviously, they've done more power and everything else. And the new BMW motors are fantastic in their own right. But, what is it? 8,400 RPM, I think, for the red line in the E92. Like, that's magical. And same thing. I've reviewed, the E60 M5, just amazing cars. So yeah, I agree. Get that kind of stuff while it's cheap if you can. I think those are very good investments potentially. As long as, again, you fix whatever may be lurking there that could be a big money problem. But as long as that has been addressed, or you can address it beforehand, sounds like otherwise the rest of the car should be fairly stout and you're good after that. I see. So Danny also says S85 V10s do have rod bearing problems. Oh, wait, that's the V8 and the E92. That's what I was thinking of, was the rod bearing thing. So maybe the S85 has something similar, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But yeah, very interesting. Also, Ryan, thanks so much, Ryan Johnson, for joining the club here. I really appreciate it. I'll keep an eye out for any of your questions. I think right below that, he says, good evening, Matt. Most interesting spot this week was a sky blue Saab 9.3 convertible. Beautiful car. Very nice spot. Yeah, I feel like there's not too many 9.3, especially convertibles out there running around still. So that's a good spot. And yeah, thanks so much for joining the club. And I'm looking forward to, more chats here and the live streams. And Darnell, thanks so much for a super chat as well. He says, have a great week, everyone. I appreciate it. Darnell, hope you have a great week as well. And thanks for stopping by here. We'll keep going for another hour and 15 minutes or so. But thanks so much, Darnell. Hope you have a great rest of your week and a good rest of your evening as well. Let me see here. So where were we here? We're not doing too bad with comments here, though. We're not too far behind. So this is good. So let me see. YH is saying he thought Atlanta was Mopars only. No, there's definitely. I know I actually have a buddy in Atlanta who's really big into the BMW scene down there, and he loves. I think he still has an E92, unless he might have swapped it recently. But he's always in a new BMW and the M stuff from the greatest hits of the past 10 or 15 years here. And he seems like he's got some fun times in Atlanta down there with the BMW crew. Let me see. And 345 now, he says he's not from Atlanta. And Joe says it's a high performance engine. Get the rod bearings done, change oil accordingly, enjoy 8250 RPM. Nice. Well, I'm glad that it's, if it is rod bearings again with that V10, or S85, we're talking M5. Sorry, that is a brain fart on my part. So that's the M5 motor. I don't know why I was thinking the S8 was codenamed S85 for that generation. Maybe it's something close. Maybe I'm just losing it. I don't know. But yeah, V10 M5, get the rod bearing done, and then it's all just amazing. Definitely watch my review on it if you want to hear all my thoughts on that car. Excuse me. And Luke says, are you responsible for gas in press cars if you take a long drive in one? So basically, they just care about being able to get to the gas station once they pick up the car at the end of the week. So as long as it has enough gas to get them to the gas station, that's it. So if I were to drive more than a tank of gas, then yeah, I gotta, fill it up, or not fill it up, but I just have to keep it fueled as long as I want to keep driving it, essentially. But typically I don't go through a full tank of gas, and as long as, again, it's got about a quarter tank or so, they're usually fine. Now the EVs, that's a different case, because a lot of them do request that I at least charge it most of the way, even if it's not 100%, just because that's more of a pain to charge, and they're on tight schedules oftentimes for these drivers. So as a courtesy, I always make sure that the cars are charged up almost to 100%. So in that case, I am responsible for fueling the EVs, but for the gas, thankfully, it's mostly free gas. That's kind of always the disclaimer with press cars is, they provide it to me for free. I get a free tank of gas for the week. They usually insure the car. I still have my own car insurance, but they cover the car itself and all that. So that's kind of the three things they always give you for free, I suppose, for everyone that does like that full disclosure of what am I getting from the brand. They're not paying me anything, but I am getting free gas, free insurance, and a free car for a week, so take that as you will. But like I've always said, to me, that doesn't sway me. It's not like, oh boy, I got a car to drive for a week, I'm going to just say nice things about it. Like, I'm spoiled to the point that doesn't faze me. And it's like, this is my job, and I don't, none of that stuff. Same as the press trips. I'm not like, wow, I'm going on a free vacation for 3 days. Like, it's not a vacation, it's work. And it doesn't sway me in the slightest if you give me a steak by the time I'm done flying all day. Like, it doesn't, it's not like I'm going to say good things about the vehicle because they fed me a steak and gave me a glass of wine. I don't care, because a lot of times it's also just, like wedding catering kind of food, and nothing fancy either half the time. So anyway, Danny says, my parents are trying to figure out the car situation. It's most likely going to be that I get the Bolt. Bolt was my dad's old commuter car to work, so he will most likely get a new car. Traverse might go away, maybe. Nice. Well, yeah, I think the Bolt would be a great car for you for a first car, because it's small, but it's still, safe. It's, just a car you're familiar with. You're already used to it. So I think that would be great if they're willing to give that to you, for sure. And Joe says, you're one of the OG car show guys. I know, almost 40. Time flies. I know all of us have kind of grown up together here. It's, I started doing the car reviews back when I was 22, pretty much. Yeah. And it's been 13 years of car reviews, and even longer. Some of you have been following me, amazingly following me even before that. I was doing videos in college, 2008 to 2012 there. Doing car spotting videos and things like that, and it's been a fun ride. And Danny says, we don't know if we need the third row of the Traverse still. Yeah, I mean, that's a great time to downsize. You save money on gas and all that if you can get rid of the Traverse for something smaller. And Dave says, hey Matt, what 90s car would you like to buy? There's so many. I was just thinking the other day how it's technically, this is slightly out of the criteria, but I've always, the car that really ignited my love of fast cars. I mean, I'd say, Gran Turismo and that whole series really as a kid was the thing that really got me into cars beyond just the typical like boys that have, Hot Wheels cars and, play arcade racing games and things. Like, I think Gran Turismo really advanced it to like, oh, this is something that I can take seriously with the licensing and with the mods and all that kind of stuff. I think Gran Turismo is entirely to credit for my early car education. So a lot of the stuff in Gran Turismo, I'm very nostalgic for all the JDM stuff. I have a huge love for as a result. And I think Fast and Furious also kind of contributed to that as well. But I think, I got a ride in a 2002 Subaru WRX back whenever they first came out. This was the fall of 2001. And I think I've told this story before. I had an awesome car salesman who was, I guess I'll tell it again because I'll be brief here. But me and my dad, I was like, Dad, I really want to go check out the new WRX. It's going to be, it came out or whatever. And he's like, okay. So we went down to the dealership one day that's nearby. And my dad was like, "Oh, he was, wondering if maybe, we could check out a WRX and maybe, my dad was saying like maybe, he could take it for a test drive or something." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, there's no way." He's like, "He can sit behind the steering wheel and we'll blow a fan in the window or whatever." And they're like all laughing it off, like I'm not like entertaining this. At this point, I was an 11-year-old kid. They're not gonna, bother this 11-year-old kid. Just, partially understandable, also kind of being dicks. So, but anyway, they we're just like not giving me the time of day. And I was, a little bummed out. Like I'm super excited to see this car, and everyone's just kind of laughing me out of the showroom pretty much. And then the one salesman, I still remember his name to this day, Vince Samuel. He was like, he came out and he's like, "Oh, I'll take you for a ride." And he's like, "Let's go." And so he took me and my dad for a ride at WRX, and it was a ride that it just transformed my passion for cars and also like cemented my love of Subaru and WRXs. My dad had kind of turned me into a Subaru fan because he had R97 and Impreza Outback Sport that he loved, and I loved it as a result as well. But that cemented my love of WRXs. That's what made me a Subaru WRX fan, was that joyride that the salesman did. I mean, he did a clutch dump, which, now being like a buyer or something, I'd be like, holy crap, like that's the worst salesman as far as, like he beat the hell out of Sturks. I mean, it made a huge impression on me, and I'm sure, as a result, Subaru is very thankful of that, because it turned me into a fan for life as a result of that. But I mean, he dumped the clutch. We were going around corners faster than I ever thought you could go around corners in my life. I was just in the back seat and I'm hanging on for dear life. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. This dude, I mean, the dude was a good driver. He was heel toeing, and I mean, just complete mind blowing. Like that ride changed my life. Like it was the coolest thing ever. And so, but getting back to the original question, I've never owned an actual WRX. I've never owned a WRX. And I feel like that'd be kind of fun. But if I were to own one, this is kind of almost like a dream car kind of thing at this point now, because I would love to have like a mint, like low miles O2 blue, World Rally Blue WRX, like bone stock. Like I was, instead of being 11, back then I was, old enough to walk in and buy it. And I never realized that dream of owning a new early 2000s WRX. And I was going to buy an 06 because I loved all the changes they made in 06. Was, I think, still my favorite styling year for the WRX. That was the goal for me. And that's why I started working super early. I got a job at McDonald's at 15 because they were the only place that hired at 15 around me back then. I was, working like a dog to try and save up for that WRX. And then, working at this car dealership, the Legacy got traded in for 20 grand, the same price I was planning on spending on an 06 WRX, lightly used back then. And I was like, well, this is more horsepower back then, way more luxurious, nicer in every way. I was like, well, I'm just going to go for the Legacy. And I'm happy I did. I loved the Legacy, and that was such a fantastic car and was better in most ways. I mean, yeah, it was a little bit heavier, but for me, it was still, I had so much fun in that car. But that unintended upgrade just did kind of rob me slightly of that initial dream of having a WRX. So, I mean, they're going for big money. I looked on like Bring a Trailer, and the few blue sedan WRXs that are like under 50,000 miles that have, gone for sale in the past few years, which is only a few of them. They're like $18,000 to $30,000, I think is what I remember seeing. I mean, not insane money or anything, but to me, it's one of those cars where I probably wouldn't drive it a whole lot. It'd be kind of a mothball situation of just like preserving it because it is, a survivor, a low mileage kind of thing. But I would want to, take it out and just realize that someday. So, I'm kind of filing that away in like my lottery dream car, collector car kind of thing someday, that I'll hopefully someday be able to, get all the classics that I've been wanting for years, get all the, other quirky stuff that I've been wanting. I'm hoping some of that stuff gets cheap enough someday to buy. But so O2 WRX, not a 90s car, but that's kind of the ultimate goal. Other 90s stuff, though, I mean, there's all kinds of things. I'd love a clone of the Fast and Furious Supra someday. That would be amazing. I'd still love an R34 GTR. That's, again, kind of really, on the edge of the 90s to 2000s thing. But R34 is still like the ultimate JDM dream in my mind. So that would be awesome. I don't know. I guess as a 90s kid, I'm just like enamored with everything from that time period. But so many cars I wouldn't mind owning, but I think those are the top ones that I'd love to have someday if I had the money. I'm curious what your guys' favorite cars from the 90s were that you'd like to own, and if you actually ever did achieve any of those dreams of owning them or have it currently. Great question, Dave. Thanks for asking. Sorry for the long roundabout answer there. But let me see. Danny's trying to help me out with pronouncing the town there. Appreciate it, Danny. And Vishal says, saw a report of an Acura exec saying they won't give up on sedans and coupes. Bold thing to say after killing the TLX. Interesting. I hadn't heard that quote, but I mean, they have Integra, so I guess, the coupe is an interesting inclusion. To say, you're not giving up on sedans, you have Integra, and I don't think that's going anywhere. So that makes sense. But to throw the coupe in there, if they in their quote said coupe, then to me that's a straight up hint, like very thinly veiled hint that they're getting a version of Prelude. That would be how I would read into that. Because otherwise, we know a new NSX is coming. That's not a revelation. So, I mean, maybe they feel the need to remind everyone that, the NSX is coming and that is a coupe, so maybe that's what he meant. But, it would on it. I mean, I guess I shouldn't put it past Honda because again, they do some stuff that doesn't make any sense sometimes, but logic would suggest you already have Prelude. Why not slap an Acura badge on it? Call it Integra Coupe or something and, have a version. It makes a lot of sense. We'll see, but I'm kind of expecting that. Maybe that's stupid to expect because, I also think we should have an Accord all-wheel drive and we should have hybrid HRVs and everything else. And that's all fantasy stuff for now. So I don't know, but it's interesting. Thanks for letting me know that, Vishal. And let me see. Kraken says, I just got out of a car loan. It's nice having $500 more in my pocket each month. I bet, especially these days, that's definitely nice. I see Danny also says, the Yugo Cabrio was sold in the U.S. from 1990 to 1992. That's crazy. And Kraken says that Street Speed 717 turned into a clout chaser when he started doing those jump videos. Lost respect for him afterwards. I hate the dangerous stuff. Keep your stuff real and you'll attract the right supporters. Yeah. I mean, I haven't talked to him in many years now. We've kind of fallen out of touch there, but he still follows me on Instagram. So he still sees my stuff, I guess, sometimes. He was a great guy. I think he probably still is. As you can probably guess, we have different personalities and, I don't agree with everything he does, but, he's like all of us, we're all trying to find our way to sustainability and trying to, continue to be able to do this as our careers and support our lifestyles. His is a lot higher than mine, but, it's really hard once you reach a certain level, especially from a lifestyle standpoint, whether it's, you bought the big house and now you got to pay all the bills for the big house, or, you have all the sweet cars. You don't want to go back down to having something that's, cheaper, whatever. It's, it gets tough to maintain that. And it's one of those things, especially whenever you're a daily vlogger, like, he is or was. I haven't kept up with this stuff super well, but I mean, it's a grind. I mean, most daily vloggers quit after a few years. I mean, the well-established YouTube thing is you go ham for a couple of years, you make your few $1,000,000 or whatever, and then you ride off into the sunset. And I mean, you make that fire account of, you, as long as you got, 2 million in the bank, if you make 5% interest on that indefinitely, that's paying you $100,000 a year just out of interest. And you live off that $2 million, the interest of that for the rest of your life. That's kind of the goal for all these YouTubers. Is it's not supposed to be long-term. It's, you make your couple of million. If it's easy, you can keep going and keep stacking the cash, go for it. But otherwise, like, it's a lot of them. That's what I see is, you hit that few $1,000,000 mark and then you bail and you just relax the rest of your life. And you put in those hard couple of years and that's it. I'm not sure, what his plan is. I have no idea, but, some people though, they really enjoy it and they want to keep at it. But it's hard. And this is why most daily vloggers do not do it forever. So I mean, in that regard, I respect them for keeping it going, because most would have quit, a long time ago and, just taken the money and ran and said, see you later, everyone. Thanks for the support for a few years, but he's still doing it, in his own way. We might not agree with it, but, The tenacity I can relate to, and sticking with that. Obviously, I'm not getting rich off of it, but I'm sitting here fighting for views just like he is, trying to stand out. And in his case, doing jump stuff, it pays off. That's how he's keeping the lights on. And we all have different lines we are willing to draw or cross as far as what we're willing to do to get the views. His is just different than mine, and it's everyone has to live with what works for them. But I wish them all the best, and it's just not the kind of content I'm interested in, really. So that's why I've kind of dropped off personally. It's tough out there being a YouTuber. It's even the ones that you might not like, they're putting themselves out there for public criticism every single day and judgment every single day. And that takes its toll on everybody, regardless of how resilient you are. It's not easy. So I can relate to that component of it as well, even if we might not have much else in common anymore. Let me see. Van Exedy says, do you like the looks of the S650? I don't have a problem with it. I still prefer S550 myself, but I think S650 is, fine on the outside. My biggest problem is the interior. I still hate the interior of S650. And for that reason alone, I have zero interest in S650. Obviously, I love the Bullet. And so for me, if I were ever to be in the position to afford a Mustang again, I would just go straight back and beg for my old Bullet back, or, any S550, because I think there's a better deal. I like the interior better. And to me, that's enough performance, enough power, enough technology. I have no interest in S650, but it's a nice improvement. I think the nice thing about S650 is the pricing has come down on them. I'm seeing some lightly used ones for mid 40s now. So that's great. So if the pricing thing is, and I know even new ones are getting heavy discounts. So if pricing has now become a little bit better, S650 gets a lot more appealing if you don't have hangups about the interior or, the other components of it, the, more troublesome modification path as far as tunes being a little harder and stuff. Excuse me, but as long as you're fine with all that, I think S650 is still great if that fits what you like. And Raphael says, this is why you have a motorcycle 115 mile per hour and no one notices. Yeah, and in that case, I do really love that motorcycles are kind of one. I have never ridden a motorcycle beyond my buddy's front yard before, but from what I understand, I'm sure you can hopefully agree, Raphael. It's a more exciting sense of speed, especially at even legal limits. If you're doing 45 on a bike, it feels a lot faster than 45 in a car. And so I think, one, it's a good way to get that speed fix, at reasonable speeds as well. But then if you are going, beyond reasonable speeds, it's something where you're able to be more maneuverable. You're able to, get up to that speed much faster and then slow down. And this is why a lot of car people do graduate to motorcycles, because once you've had all the fast cars and stuff, or you've lost to another faster car enough, then it's like, well, what is unbeatable? And beyond some crazy, high horsepower build, which still might end up getting beaten by a supercar or something, it's just like, well, I go to a bike and it's way cheaper as well. And you kind of scratch that itch way more effectively. And also the nice thing about motorcycles is, it's less of a danger to everyone else. You have your fun, and you are doing that on your own, and you put your own life in your hands, but you're not really risking anyone else as much. I mean, like, prime example, when that motorcyclist hit me and sideswiped me at 50 miles an hour, he was going 50 on a bike, and he was a little bit messed up. But like, if I had been sideswiped by another 4,000-pound car in my Mustang at 50 miles an hour, I probably would have gone off the hillside, and it would have been way worse versus him just bouncing off of me. And I mean, again, I still got a little bit of an injury and stuff, and the car was 16 grand in damage. So I mean, it definitely did some damage, but would have been a lot worse if he was, doing that same thing in a car. So, if you got to go crazy fast, personally, I'd rather see it on a motorcycle for sure than a car. But that's just, again, me probably being uncool or whatever. Let me see. Danny says he's the weird car nerd for my age group. Hey, it's a fun hobby, and I'm glad you're in it, Danny. And Michael says, did you ever have any issues with your WRX? Ours has been at the dealership for 8 months. It's a lemon, and they can't fix it. That's unfortunate. Well, like you probably caught with my earlier comment there, I've never owned a WRX. I had the Legacy GT Spec B, and that was a 2006. I had that from 07 to 2013. And then I had the BRZ, and that was the last Subaru that I owned. So I've never had a WRX, but if anyone else wants to weigh in on their thoughts on owning a WRX, feel free. But it's so funny how Subaru has this reputation for reliability. I mean, you got a lemon, and most people don't have as many issues with WRXs as you've had. If it's been at the dealership for 8 months, that's definitely out of the ordinary. And I'm sorry you've had that horrible experience. Hopefully, you can lemon lot and get out of it, and Subaru buys it back or whatever, because that's clearly you got an oddball. That's not common. But I think Subarus in general have this really stellar reputation. I mean, even Consumer Reports has this whole big thing about how Subaru was the top ranking brand last year or recently here for reliability. And I don't see it. I mean, maybe, they don't leave people stranded as much, but like my dad had to do head gaskets and a bunch of engine tune-up stuff to both the 97 Impreza Outback Sport and his 07 Outback. Both of them had to have heavy overhauls to the engine that were $1,000+ and this was pre-inflation, so probably $1,500 or $2,000 these days. Had to put a bunch of money into the motor at like 100,000 miles. You don't have to do that with a Toyota, with a Honda, with most other vehicles, but like it's like been consistent like clockwork. At 100,000 miles into the Subaru, like, all right, time to do all this stuff. Otherwise, you have leaking issues. My brother-in-law has I think 15 or 16 Outback. He's like, oh, it's leaking like a quart of oil every 1,000 miles or something like that. He's like, I just carry oil on me, and he's always topping up. It's paid off, and it's whatever. He doesn't care. But like, and he even has a high ranking of Subaru. He's like, oh, it's a really great car, but I'm putting oil in it every time I turn around, and isn't it a great car then? If it was 300,000 miles, okay, but he's like maybe over 100,000 miles, and he's putting a quart of oil in it all the time. And it's just like I hear all those kinds of stories. Even like my father-in-law, he had a Forester. He had an awesome I can't remember it was the second generation of the Forester, not like the refreshed first gen, but like the actual new second gen version. I can't remember the year. He had it with a manual, and his motor was fine, but there was just one point where like the whole all-wheel drive system just seized, and the car literally would not roll. And he sold it to Carvana. I think it was around 2020, because I think it was like really early pandemic possibly. But he sold it to Carvana, and like they had to drag it onto the tow truck because the wheels would not turn. And I don't know if there was just something that ended up leaking differential fluid or what caused that whole thing to lock up. But like, yeah, I think he had maybe low 100,000 miles on his Forester. I don't even think it was over 150, not even close. And the car literally stopped rolling. So obviously there's ways to fix these things, and these don't have to be career-ending things for the cars. But again, these are just things that I have so many stories like that, and I don't have. I mean, a lot of my family has Subaru, so I guess it's very immediate to me. But I don't hear this kind of stuff about Hondas with their all-wheel drive system, or Honda motors, going through a court once they hit 100,000 miles, or Toyota motors doing that, or anything for that matter. Honestly, I mean, some people complain about Hyundai motors grenading themselves at 100,000 miles, but to me, even that's like equal with these Subaru issues. So like, I'm sure a lot of people have really good luck with Subarus, but I think the key difference, this is a big marketing thing with Subaru. Subaru loves to say that like 97% of Subarus are still on the road that were sold in the past, however many years, 15, 20 years or whatever. And I don't doubt their number, but I think that there's a difference in culture around Subarus. It's kind of the same thing as Toyotas and Hondas, where it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of people that buy them expect good reliability, but those people also think about reliability, and as a result, they're more likely to do their maintenances on time. They're more likely to be meticulous about that, and so therefore they will continue to have that good experience because they're that type of buyer that thinks about that, versus maybe a Hyundai buyer again, speaking stereotypically, but especially these Hyundais that are on their second or third owners, those people are not typically meticulous on maintenance. They're skipping oil changes. They bought the car cheap. They don't want to spend $60 every 3 or 5,000 miles or whatever, on an oil change. So they skip this stuff, and then it's just like, well, why are these Hyundais blowing up at 100,000 miles? Probably because they've had the oil changed once every 15,000 miles if they're lucky, and so there's some of this versus like people don't dare to do that kind of abuse most of the time to a Honda or a Toyota because there are people that are buying them because they understand, like, you take care of this thing, it's going to last you forever. I think with Subaru, you have some of that same goodwill of like, okay, I'm buying this thing. I am in this impression that this is going to be reliable. And even when you have an issue like my dad had with both of his Subarus in the past, they fork out the money and they keep it on the road. If there's a Hyundai that, you're the Hyundai dealer and they say, oh, you got to spend $1,500 to, fix the engine or whatever. They just say, nah, forget it. Like, I'm just going to get something else. But Subaru owners, they have all the stickers on the back of their cars. They have all these attachments to it. They fork out the money, and that's why they're still on the road. Because I think a lot of it is. I mean, I'm sure there's some Subarus that they've done nothing but oil changes and they're a million miles or whatever, and that's great. But I think a lot of them, they're just buyers are more willing to spend the money to keep them on the road. Not that it's Subaru's spectacular reliability, just the fact that you can keep anything on the road if you put enough money into it. I think that's they don't make that distinction. I don't know if they've ever, studied that component. If they have, they certainly haven't made that public, I don't think. But like, that's my hunch on why Subaru can claim all these things. Is it's like, yeah, sure, they're high mileage and this, that, and the other, but how many thousands of dollars did these owners spend along the way? They might not be mad about it, but they spent money that they probably wouldn't have had to spend on a Toyota or a Honda, in my opinion. I could be off base, but that's just my 2 cents on Subaru reliability there. Again, sorry for the tangent, but I'm sorry about the bad luck you've had with the WRX, but especially the older WRXs. I mean, the EJs, the running joke is that motor just goes through ringland failures left and right. That's just like this fragile motor, and especially the 5-speeds were fragile transmissions made out of glass pretty much. Everyone complained about the 5-speed before they finally upgraded the 6-speed. And it's all, I feel like Subaru has always had like bad actual reliability, but again, people just love them so much they don't care. And that's very different than actually just being reliable. So anyway, it's really strong marketing, and I commend Subaru for, having this image that I don't think is totally warranted, in my opinion, as far as being this rock solid, reliable kind of thing. But I mean, they're great cars and they have their redeeming qualities. I'm not going to bash Subaru for the good things they do, which is there's a lot that they do right. But not. Just always befuddles me, the people that expect high reliability out of a Subaru. I mean, but Consumer Reports and stuff propagates that and perpetuates that mentality. And they have their data. I think their data is flawed, but it is what it is. And let me see here. So Danny says, what are your thoughts on Jeep bringing back the Cherokee? It's interesting because it's a regular hybrid, 1.6 liter turbo inline 4 with 2 electric motors and an eCVT. Jeep calls it EVT. Pretty interesting. And comments on their review and reveal of it were destroying it. One comment said, Jeep plus eCVT, I smell trouble. Yes, I saw all that stuff. I actually didn't get invited to that. I was kind of surprised because usually I do stuff with Jeep and I would have totally gone to the reveal of that. But I'm kind of glad I didn't because, it seems like people are just all pissed off about it. Typical, any new Stellantis reveal, everyone's just immediately pissed off no matter what. Now, do I think that was the best approach in 2025? Probably not. But again, this is another reminder. When was that car conceived? It was not conceived in 2025. That car was conceived in 2023 when everyone was downsizing. Everything was going, hybridized. And, it's so hard, because this is the problem with fast changing culture, fast changing policy and administrations and stuff, is you often get caught, with the wrong thing at the wrong time, because you got to plan long term, and without stable expectations and a stable progression of, what people want, it's very hard to nail it on the head as far as timing goes. And this is a prime example of that. if that had launched in 2023, I think it would have been a little more favorable as far as how it was received. I mean, you'd still have people that, be pissed off that it doesn't have, a V6 that gets 10 miles to the gallon. But like, I think it, if you look at it in the context of what it's competing with, which I think it is classified as a compact. I'm not sure if they're trying to play it off as a midsize or not. I'm assuming it's compact class. You look at everything else in that segment, most of them are hybridized to some degree. I mean, RAV4 is all hybrid now. You have, CRV and most of the trims is hybrid. You have hybrid variants of, Hyundai and Kia and everything else. So I think, it makes sense that that's the way they would go. And again, to the people on the internet, yes, they wanted to have a V6 and be body on frame, and they just want an old Cherokee. Just go buy an old Cherokee. If that's what you want, if you want, a single din head unit and you want to have, 2 airbags in your thing and you want to just, if you want an old Cherokee, buy an old Cherokee. I think I've heard actual automotive, not executives, but employees within car companies that have kind of said the same thing sometimes when they see comments like that. It's like, if you want the old thing and nothing else is going to ever make you happy, then go buy the old thing and enjoy it. Like, this is 2025. You can't expect every car company to have a 15-year-old engine. You can't expect it to have, simple, no tech stuff. Like, you got to have the automatic emergency braking these days. You have to have all the tech features, the giant screens. That's what customers expect. Whether or not it's what enthusiasts want doesn't matter. They're trying to go for mass appeal. The clear mass appeal thing is that touchscreens are what most people want. Now, maybe we will start to see people get burned out with that, and that will change, in culture possibly as well. But for right now, people want to have, their smartphone integration with a big screen. They want to have something comfortable that looks cool and that has the guise of off-road ability and, that mental boost of, oh, I can go climb Mount Everest in my crossover and I'll be fine. And, whether or not that's remotely realistic is, not important, because it's just the marketing is all people care about these days. So, yes, it was destined to fail from the get-go as far as the enthusiasts go. So that is all irrelevant. Now, even for regular crossover buyers, I know some of them would say, okay, well, if I want something in that segment, I'm going to go for, one of the ones that does it naturally aspirated. Like we have, Honda and Toyota doing the naturally aspirated engine with the hybrid component. I think that is the better way to go about it. If I had been calling the shots for Cherokee, I think what I would have done instead of the 1.6, I would have done the Tiger Shark 2.4, I believe. Naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine, maybe do a next generation of that or something, make it a little bit more reliable and a little more fuel efficient. But I think doing a naturally aspirated motor would have caused people to be a little more confident in its, long-term reliability. So if you did that with hybridization, I think that would have been better. The eCVT thing, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like it still goes to a physical 4-wheel drive system. I didn't spend a ton of time looking into it because, again, since I don't do the weekly updates anymore, I just kind of catch headlines and, I catch up on other stuff whenever I have time. But I think it has still a real 4-wheel drive option you can get. So I don't know how that works with the CVT, because that seems like it wouldn't be totally compatible. But, if it has some off-road cred still, it's all about that fuel efficiency. And if you would have designed this car in 2025, we see what Ram's doing and everything else. Like, they would have absolutely put in, less efficient engine and, transmission. But I think, they were chasing, again, in 2023 mindset or 2022 mindset, they were chasing good fuel economy. CVT is the way to get the best fuel economy. It might not be the most fun, but CVT is clearly most of the time better from a fuel economy standpoint. The 1.6 turbo, if you are driving like an enthusiast, it can get worse fuel economy than a naturally aspirated engine. But if you are the average person who, isn't accelerating hard from a stop, that doesn't care about performance, that is, completely oblivious to what's under their hood, it's going to probably be the better motor most of the time, for those types of people. So, again, I understand what people want. I just think it's unrealistic. And, again, I think they could have played it a little bit better with a naturally aspirated motor. But aside from that, I think that they did what that segment, the direction that segment's going in. They read the room and they said, okay, this is what everyone else is doing. we'll do that as well. And I think they played that very well, because you look at, if they designed this car 2 or 3 years ago, they didn't know that RAV4 was going to go all hybrid. They probably guessed that was going to be the case, but like, they didn't know for sure. And I think they read that very well to be like, hey, this is probably the way the future is going. It's just not having a non-hybrid option. We'll do that too. And they now have come out, literally, it's launching at the same time as RAV4 here, it seems, in this fall, neck and neck with RAV4. Now, I think RAV4 will probably obviously be the more reliable one, just because Toyota has more experience with regular hybrids. And also, I think, again, that naturally aspirated motor helps. But I think Jeep being, a more distinctive competitor with the styling and the Jeep thing, I think it's going to give him, I think, I can't remember pricing, but I think pricing didn't seem insane to me. So I think, again, based off of how everyone else is priced and stuff, I think it should be competitive to the regular person. Everyone on YouTube is going to hate it, and that's fine. Sales will ultimately, be the final judge of how, whether they did it right or not. Excuse me, but I think it has decent potential. Now, I also think like Hornet had good potential. They played Hornet right as well, and no one wants that. So, even rational thought might not be enough to save them. We'll just have to see. But I think that, Cherokee looks good. It seems like, interior's pretty decent for that segment as well and everything. And I'm just happy to see a new Cherokee, because, we haven't had a Cherokee here for a couple of years since the last one dropped out without a replacement. And, I think Jeep needs more of these slightly affordable things. And so I'm happy to see that kind of fill that gap in the lineup for Jeep. And so we'll see what happens. But that's my 5 minutes on that. So, I'm curious what you guys think about it as well. And let me see. So Luke says, sorry, I missed the other super chats. I apologize, guys. And also Fook, I missed your thing there. I apologize. Fook, thanks so much for being a member for 27 months now. He says that salesman single-handedly saved us from potential legacy GT fans. Right. Yeah, that could have been the channel name for sure. It would have been a little bit more of a mouthful. And there's a few other, like, I actually, back then, when I made the Super X Fan channel, I also was super into Scion TCs at the time. And I did also make a second channel called Scion TC Fan. I never actually posted anything on that channel, but that was the other potential one. And that's another car too. That's also not 90s, but that's another 2000s vehicle that I always loved. And I kind of, that car always appealed to me, the first gen TC. And I kind of wish at some point that I had owned one of those. So those always seemed so cool to me. But anyway, thanks so much, Fook, for being a member for 27 months now. And Sean, thank you so much for a super chat. He says, thoughts on the Mazda CX-30 all-wheel drive turbo. I see one of my work a lot. I like the size and the styling, and the performance specs look pretty good too. Yeah, really the only hesitation I have about recommending CX-30 is the small back seat and the small trunk. But if you say you like the size of it, then I have no other things to complain about. My wife Beth's uncle, he had a CX-30. He's a little bit of a larger guy. He didn't like the seats. He thought they were too firm. So if you haven't sat in one, sit in one. I personally have no problem with the seats, but he had that complaint with it. And the other thing I will say, Mazda wise, that I just like to warn people about, the headlights in them are pretty expensive. So like my sister, actually, she has a 2022 maybe CX-5, and she had her headlight go out, and I guess it was something had happened where the headlight, also the self-leveling motor for it also went out, and apparently there is no way to actually just fix that. You have to replace the entire headlight. I looked into it. There is no way to just fix the leveling motor. And as a result, they were like, well, like, your headlight burned out and this also went at the same time. And so now you need to pay us $1,000 for a new headlight or something. And she was like, what? And that wasn't under the warranty, because she's beyond 3 years, 36,000 miles. And they were trying to stick her with that. I think thankfully they ended up covering it somehow. I think she actually got the extended warranty, and that's how it saved her. But like, Mazdas are really reliable, but like if the headlights fail, and apparently this is a thing, because I saw this on Reddit, other people complaining about this. If headlights are failing and you got to pay $1,000 to get your headlight fixed, that's crappy. So that's the only other thing I'll say is a warning for, buying a modern Mazda. Other than that, though, I love CX-30. I spent, a bunch of time in the CX-30. I went to the launch event for it as well. CX-30 is fantastic, drives great. It's, I think, still my favorite driving one of the bunch in that segment. Nicest interior, I'd say, from a luxury standpoint in that segment as well. And just, yeah, super nice. So I love CX-30. And and maybe CX-30 has a different kind of engineering to the headlight that maybe you can fix the self-leveling motor in those versus the CX-5, but at least the refreshed CX-5s, those headlights are pricey. So just the only warning there. But let me know if you have any follow-up questions, though, Sean. But I love them. I think they're great. And thank you so much for the super chat. And YH, thank you so much for a super chat. He says, FYI, graduating to a Hellcat next summer. Wow, I'm surprised you're switching over from the Ford. It seems like you love that Mustang, but Hellcat sounds like it'll fit what you're looking for. Just the other thing to keep in mind is Hellcats don't put power down well. So just keep that in mind if you are out there trying to track race. Even if you're got the advantage on horsepower, it's not going to hook up until some real high speeds. And also, I hope that you can park in maybe in Canada it's not as bad as it is here in the States, but I know in the States, Hellcat is the most stolen car out there, especially if you don't have it garaged. So if you have a Hellcat, I'd highly recommend garaging it if you do get one, if you don't already. Yeah, well, congrats if you do go that direction. I mean, Hellcat's so fun. I mean, the supercharger line, I still think the styling is awesome, and they're absolutely a blast for sure. He says, just kidding, I'm a Mustang boy. All right, so you're just screwing around there, but I do love Hellcats though. They're great. And let me see here. Where were we? So I see some of the comments here are catching up from the earlier discussion because we've fallen behind with my various tangents here. Luke says, if you saw a guy at the game yesterday punch a metal pole, that was my contractor. Interesting. I don't watch the game, so I haven't seen anything from yesterday's game, but that's funny. Danny says power numbers for the new Cherokee are 210 horsepower and 230 pound-feet of torque. Which is, very competitive for that segment. I know a lot of people were super mad about that, but what does CRV do? 204 horsepower. What does RAV4 hybrid do? What is it? I think 222 or something like that. I mean, it's, we're right there. And especially with the turbo component of the Cherokee, that's going to actually make it feel stronger off the line than some of the naturally aspirated stuff. So, again, I think looking at what else is out there, it's absolutely, doing the same as everybody else pretty much. And Kraken says GX is kind of the luxury forerunner, kind of. GX is, more related to Land Cruiser, I see. Yeah, Danny says, it's bigger, a lot bigger. And I believe the wheelbase and the whole platform is stretched. It's quite a bit different. It's still TNGA F, I believe, is the truck platform. So it's still technically on that same platform, but that's the same platform they use for Tacoma, Tundra. I mean, it's got a lot of uses, so there's a lot of variability there. So being on the same platform doesn't mean it's, all the same wheelbase or, super related, beyond, some of the obvious stuff. But, and I see Vishal saying, the Forerunner doesn't have a direct Lexus variant. Yeah. And Tastebud says he loves that Audi Lambo V10 engine so much. Yeah, they're great. The rod bearing for the E93s and all that. Yeah. JD says, thoughts on a 10-year-old N55 435i? Safe to buy if pretty clean. I don't recall which engine was the one that had the twin turbo failures left and right. I think that was just the 335s. I think by the time they got to the 435, because 335 coupes were the ones I think that had that most problematic first generation of that motor. I think once you got to the later ones, it was better. Don't quote me on that. Maybe someone else that knows more about that can weigh in. So might be better for the newer ones there. The only thing, the one thing that I always say about old European cars is they're more over-engineered typically, and so there's more parts that break or have lesser amounts of tolerance of what they are willing to endure before they fail. So My advice typically, and if you're 10 years old, it might be kind of hard, but I'd try and get an extended warranty if you can. Not a sketchy one. If you can get one from like a dealership or something, an actual legit extended warranty. Um, because there can be some expensive fixes, and also you're dealing with BMW parts, which are more expensive, BMW labor. If you want it done, even if you don't go to the dealer, just taking it to a BMW shop is going to be higher than, a Toyota shop or something. So, there's that higher maintenance cost. And older European cars also like to have some electrical phantoms a little more frequently than, some non-European vehicles. So I'm always a little leery of super old European cars. And this is kind of not a trap, but this is a common thing that a lot of people fall into, is they say, wow, it's super exciting. I can get this car that was very nice just 10 years ago and I can get it for dirt cheap. It's like, there's a reason why they depreciate so fast. And it's often because they are very expensive. I mean, the old rule of thumb, I don't know if I agree with this entirely, but the initial thinking, especially for the super high-end European stuff, is if you can't afford it new, you can't afford it used, because eventually, even if you are skipping out on the high payments and the high depreciation, you then get hit with the high maintenance stuff that those first owners and those lessees or whatever didn't have to pay for. And so that's the risky component with the old European stuff. I personally, my rule is to not get anything that is beyond a certified pre-owned kind of period. So, if you're buying an off lease, BMW, Audi, Porsche, things like that, Mercedes, if you buy them off lease and you get a certified, kind of, usually it's like a 2-year warranty. If you can buy one of those certified, you got a 2-year coverage, you keep it beyond that, maybe a few more years you can kind of gamble on. But typically, once you get beyond 5 years old with European stuff, I start to get real nervous about it personally. Again, some people have great luck, and I know BMWs are very well engineered. I talked to multiple people that have hundreds of thousands of miles on their turbocharged BMW, whatever, and they're fine. As long as you are good with the maintenance, meticulously changing your oil at the specified intervals, all that stuff should probably be okay. But again, there still is just these quirky electronic things. And I got burned by this in the Mini. I fell into this temptation with the R56 Mini Cooper S, which, is the least reliable, I think, of all the Minis. And, it had a plastic thermostat that failed and left me stranded with a steaming hood, up. And that was well documented in my bad day in a Mini video that I did many years ago. And then the water pump failed on me. All this stuff within a 6-month period. And I mean, water pump and the thermostat are two, fairly big things. Thankfully, I did have an extended warranty on it, so that was all covered, but still being stranded twice in my Mini in 6 months, like, that's why I was like, I got to get out of this car because it's just falling apart. And then the clutch started to go at 60,000 miles on this Mini Cooper S, which you should be able to get more life out of a clutch. And a clutch job, this was 10 years ago, so I don't even want to know how much it is now. But a clutch job back in 2014 for an R56 Mini Cooper S was like $3,000 for the clutch and the labor, which also is just insane. So, like, there's those types of things where, like, I was like, I gotta get out of this car before it just buries me on, financially and stuff. So that was, I loved that thing and I was hoping it would be great, but it was just like, no, this was a car that was, $35,000 when it was new or whatever. It was owned by a doctor. It seemed like it was all, very, top notch. And I got it with an extended warranty, but even that wasn't enough. It was still a giant pain in the butt. And I was just like, I couldn't get rid of it soon enough. It was a shame because I loved that car. I miss a lot about that car. It's just so fun. I love that thing. I had the double moon roofs that opened up, and it's just such a great summer cruiser. Such a fun little car. I mean, I'm still literally like upset about the fact that car failed me. Because I still am tempted. I mean, the Fiat kind of is, my second chance at a small little, European city car, I suppose. But that was kind of one of the appealing things for getting the Fiat 500e, is like getting hopefully a more reliable, small little thing that I think is actually doing the Mini thing better than Mini is these days, because Mini's gone too kind of hard edged and too just weird, in my opinion. I think the Fiat is kind of a better Mini, in my opinion, these days. And it's a car that, in Europe had been around for 5 years before I got mine, back in the winter. So I'm confident it'll be, a solider more solid experience. We'll see. I could be wrong. Knock on wood. But anyway, so sorry, tangent galore tonight. But yeah, I got burned by that as well. So I can speak from experience. Buying an older BMW product can bite you in the butt sometimes. So that's the only thing I will say. But maybe some of those common failure points have already been addressed with the car you're looking at. And if it seems really well kept, good maintenance records, and you kind of know what you're getting yourself into, and you have the budget to allot to that stuff, then absolutely could be a great experience. And let me see. And I did review a 435i, I believe, a long time ago. It was probably about 10 years ago. If you search 435 on my channel, I think it's on there. I believe it was a 435. It might have been a 430, but I think it was a 435. Yeah, good cars. And Danny says the 2008 RS4 had a 4.2 liter V8 that revved to 8250. Sounds absolutely glorious, revved out. Yeah, those are great. I drove those new, and I didn't beat on them, but I may have ridden along with someone who took one of those out, and it's a fun motor. I mean, that's the same thing they use in the R8 as well, but the RS4, it's really magical with the manual and everything else. They are really good. But yeah, I remember unboxing 2008 RS4s when they were coming off the truck. I was one of the people that kind of checked in cars and took them out of the bags and pulled all the plastic off of them, and I did that for countless RS4s of that generation, and got them all clean and sparkly. And I remember backing it into the showroom for a new owner of one of those, and being like, man, this is a special moment for them, and it was awesome to be part of that, and have their perfectly clean, brand new 2008 RS4 there for them. I still remember the new smell of a new RS4. It was good times. I'm very thankful. My time from 2006 to 2011 working at a Porsche, BMW, Audi dealer. There are some real high points there for sure. Yeah, and let me see here. I'll try and catch up here. We got 20 more minutes to go. I don't want to fall too far behind here, so I'm going to try and get a little quicker with the answers. So let me see. I see TFI's excited we mentioned Saab. And Danny says VAG did crazy things in the early 2000s. V10 in the S8, W12 in the A8. They put a W8 in the Passat with a manual option. I know, and all the awesome diesels they did, before the Dieselgate stuff. I mean, there's just so many cool things for sure from Volkswagen Group. It's, again, maybe I'm just being stupidly sentimental, but like, man, the 2000s were just so great. And I mean, even I was just talking to Beth the other night about how, like 2010 to 2015, I think for me, I was really a high point just from just the excitement of everything in my life and everything with YouTube and, just all the fun experiences I had being on the movie sets in that time period and all that other fun stuff. But if it's the 2000s too, just so many cool cars. And Luke says, my buddy's selling his 2023 WRX. He says it feels too heavy to toss into a curve, and he noticed oil on the spark plugs, got it fixed under warranty. Yikes. Well, that's not great to hear. I mean, glad it was fixed, but still should not be seeing that. That's, man, another bad report on a Subaru. That's unfortunate. Thanks for mentioning that, though, Luke. And Danny says, I wish we got the Passat R36 in the US for 2007, just a bigger brother to the Golf R32 of that same year. 3.6 liter VR6 with a 6-speed DSG and 4-motion all-wheel drive and a wagon or sedan. I don't know if I knew about the Passat R36. I'll have to look into that. I appreciate the info. That's cool. That sounds amazing. Excuse me. And TFI says Ferdinand Peisch era VAG was wild, offered a V10 TDI just because they could, right? I saw a V10 TDI Touareg in Vancouver, had to do a double take because I'd never seen one before. Yeah, it was crazy. I'd say maybe 10 years ago or so, I saw a couple Passat W8s on a regular basis. And I was like, man, this is wild. These things are out there. It's just, again, I feel like stuff like that is going to be huge money someday. A Passat W8, like, maybe I'm crazy, but you can't tell me that's not going to be a huge dollar car at Barrett Jackson in 30 years. Like, I don't know. I just think it's going to be desirable at some point because especially they're probably so rare and it's just wild, everything's so ubiquitous with the motors and everything these days. It's just like having all this differentiation. It's just, you're never going to see it again, you know? And see, Danny says, yeah, don't forget also the V12 TDI and the Q7. Yeah, yeah, that's the other one I had forgotten about. But yeah, like a diesel V12, like it's almost like so strange. Like it's like I wonder if we kind of tripped into like some bizarre reality for a few years. All the crazy stuff. It sounds too crazy to even like have actually happened, and it's like, but actually did. It's just like one of those weird fever dreams we're gonna like wake ourselves up from or something. That there's a diesel V12 in a SUV, no less. And they also made a prototype of the first Gen R8 with the same V12 TDI as the Q7. I remember I think actually Carbuzz might have done an article on this recently about the diesel V12 that almost happened for the supercar there, which would have been awesome. I think maybe make it a little higher revving. I don't remember what the red line was for that in the Q7, but that kind of thing would be so sweet to see, to have seen back then. Danny says the R8 was called the R8 Le Mans concept. Yeah, I remember when the concept debuted, and it was, again, this like crazy. I remember the first time I saw an R8 because I was working at the Audi dealer. I mean, that thing just looked like a UFO. The first time I saw one, it helped because it was kind of on an elevated platform. I mean, like those very futuristic for the time little dot DRLs before anyone was doing, LED DRLs. Seeing that and like walking up to that thing, I was just like, whoa, like that is crazy styling. These days, I guess it doesn't look that crazy, but like as an 18-year-old in 2008, I mean, I was just like, holy crap, this thing looks wild. Let me see. KSNT says, my first car was the 2002 WRX. That's awesome that you actually were able to do that. He says, I bought it without even knowing anything about it. Just saw an ad on Craigslist and fell in love with the styling. That's awesome. If I had a light clutch pedal, I would still own it. Or if it had a light clutch pedal, I'd still own it. I just can't deal with heavy clutch and heavy traffic daily. That totally is understandable. But that's awesome that you had one. That's great. And Lancelot says, I'd love to get a Pontiac Firehawk. That would be an awesome 90s car for sure. And TFI says, I liked how Subaru put turbo motors in their Outback, Legacy, and Forester with a manual and automatic. A second-gen Forester XT is a fantastic daily. Yeah, that would be an awesome daily for sure. And every once in a while, I'll see a nice like lowered one, done up really nicely. And yeah, I always thought that'd be a cool thing. And there's actually someone offered one to me in Ohio. And I should review it because I've never reviewed a early Forester XT. I did the later generation with the 4-speed automatic that just wasn't good. But I'd love to try, or maybe it was the CVT that those had, the early CVT, whatever it was for the bigger one. I think it's 3rd gen Forester. That one was not super exciting to me, but 2nd gen would be cool. And Zachary says, I grew up around Mustangs, but Gran Turismo showed me the wider world of automotive cars. The Mitsubishi GTO 3000 GT was a beast in the game, and my nostalgia would be through the roof owning one. That would be a fun one for sure. 3000 GTs, especially the VR4, very special cars. And yeah, the GTO version, I guess you could import those now. Because they had like the different styling for the GTO, and there was a point, I think, where GTO was a little more different, if I remember correctly, right? Or maybe I feel like there was another Mitsubishi GTO I'm thinking of. Maybe it was different generations or something. I remember them like not having flip up headlights and everything, and just having like the more pointy nose. But either way, all that stuff. I mean, yeah, and that's one of the fun things now. All those like first and Gran Turismo 2 kind of cars that are available now to import as 25 years or older. It makes for some fun, interesting stuff. I'd probably have my own mini like Gran Turismo garage collection if I won the lottery. I'd just import a bunch of cool stuff, just because it's so fun to see some of these things that I've never like actually seen a Mitsubishi GTO in person, like the actual JDM version. It'd be so cool. I still desperately want to go to Japan someday. But yeah, good times. I hope you can get a 3000 GT someday, Zachary. That'd be really fun. And Michelle says, I'm a 2000s kid. I'd love 04 to 08 TL Type S. Always love that generation TL. Still looks great to this day. I agree. It does. And I'm so mad. I had an opportunity. So number one Cochrane, the dealer that I've been doing a lot of the reviews from recently, They had an '04 TL with like 70,000 miles came in. It wasn't a Type S, but a regular V6 TL 2004. And I was going to review it. And I first wanted to do the K5 GT because I thought it was going to be a better one from a view standpoint. So I did the K5, and I was going to do the TL a couple of days later, and then it like disappeared so fast. It came that car. I'm sure someone just recognized the unicorn that it was and snatched it up really fast. But like that car didn't even have pictures or like a description yet. It just like had popped up on their site as like, because I often when I'm searching for cool cars to review from Cochrane, they have a giant inventory. I'm always looking for like oldest stuff, manual stuff, coupe stuff, all these easier things to kind of sift through. It's just there's like they got like 1,500 used cars or something. But that was like the oldest thing that they had at one point. It was an '04. And I'm like, man, that would have been amazing to review. I just didn't get to it fast enough. But I'm hoping to do more of that kind of stuff here in the future, and I'm going to keep my eye out for cool things like that. Let me see. I see. Very cool. I can't read your username there, but he says the only market where manufacturers still give a crap of retaining some soul in their cars like everyone did back in the 2000s is just the Americans at this point, with the Hemis returning and all. Yeah, there's some of that. I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it. I think that, a lot of the Japanese companies like Toyota are doing awesome things. I think, bringing in the GR Corolla shows that passion. I think the GR86, shows that passion, especially for the affordable stuff. It's kind of easier to do supercars and, do, these high-end things, but to do affordable sports cars and not just one, but three, if you count Supra, that to me shows a passion, and not just a passion for performance cars still, but also a passion for the affordable stuff and, sticking to their roots and not trying to go crazy up market. Obviously, I mean, again, they have LFA and other things, but, I love that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think Toyota is currently still my favorite brand, just because, awesome. Every single one of their, affordable vehicles is fantastic. Not the best in every way, but, really, really fun. And I think, they just, to me, deserve the respect that they did actually spend the money and, put out these things that aren't hot sellers, that, don't probably make a lot of commercial sense, but, shows their passion. And I mean, I rode just a few months ago, I rode shotgun with the chief engineer of, this GRMN Corolla that's, coming out here soon. And, just a super nice guy, just super passionate, just excited about the car. And, very knowledgeable too. I mean, I can't tell you how many like chief engineers, whether a lot of these people is just like a title these days, they're not actually the chief engineer. But a lot of these chief engineers, I talk to them about the product, and they, they aren't super knowledgeable. They're not, super passionate sometimes about the product, but like, I think it's with Toyota, like they really do care. And I mean, I've even had so many great discussions with, some of these guys that have come over from Japan for these launches or whatever. And I'm able to talk to them about the passion that goes into how they come up with these things. I had the honor of having dinner with myself and a couple other people, but I was able to sit at the same table and discuss with the engineer of the regular Corolla back when that came out. And like, getting to pick the brain of the person who has to engineer a car that is a global car that has to satisfy people in Japan, people in America, people in Thailand, people in every corner of the world. The Corolla is sold. They sell millions of them, and the pressure of that. And I mean, getting to talk to, them, I mean, the passion is there. I mean, absolutely. Like, they really do care. I think it's just at the end of the day, what is going to make the most business sense? But I think Toyota is kind of almost in that same position as Volkswagen Group we were talking about earlier in the early 2000s with all these quirky, crazy things. I think Toyota's in that position where they're big enough, they can, play around with this GT3 car and, do all these, homologation specials. They can do the, rally cars for the road because they're still in rally, and, they have the money and they have, the willpower with the executives as well to push through. Akio Toyoda being a champion for this stuff. And also his successor, who his name evades me right now, Koji Sato, also having this passion. He's the guy that was responsible for Lexus LC, and that's part of why I think LC is still sticking around, because he's now running the show. I mean, Akio, I'm sure, loved the LC as well, but I think they have the right leadership for enthusiasts. They have the right, money bags for to keep this stuff around that other companies would shoot down. And that's part of why I'm a big cheerleader for Toyota, because they really are doing so many fantastic things at an affordable level, and things that other companies couldn't dream of doing, I think, right now. And it sounds like there's more coming. We'll see, but it sounds like there's probably some kind of Celica at some point. I don't know anything, but it sounds like there's strong rumors of a Celica. There's rumors of an MR2. There's all these other things. So it's just going to get better. And it sounds like they have a commitment to GR86 as well. Hopefully they're going to keep GR Corolla around. There's this new turbo 2-liter 4-cylinder that sounds like it's going to be fantastic. And they're going to keep with it, and I love it. And they're also still not being like Dodge or someone else where it's everything or nothing with a gas guzzler or electric. Like, they're also meeting people where they're at with gas, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and electric, and it's got some great new electric stuff coming out here as well. So I don't know. Again, I'm sure everyone's taking their shots here since I've mentioned GR Corolla. It had to happen at some point during this live stream, but I do really think the Toyota deserves more credit than even the American companies do, and are doing it in a more responsible way, I think, as well. And Dave says, great story about your WRX ride. I had a similar one. At 17, a salesman let me test drive the new 1989 Eagle Talon turbo oval drive. I couldn't drive manual, so he got me started. Wow, yeah, that's that's another one where it's like, it's crazy nowadays to think about that, but like, I'm sure that made a huge impression on you, Dave. And those types of things can turn people into fans for life, and at very least, make you a huge fan of that car and aspire to own one. But that's, what salesman these days would be like, oh, sure, you're good. You don't know how to drive a manual. I'll help you out in this. Yeah, I'm sure a car that probably was pretty hot and in high demand. And, again, maybe some people would consider that, irresponsible, or maybe you ruined the clutch on this brand new car or whatever. I don't know. But like, having that faith in people, I think is that always made the biggest impression on me. I mean, even like, as a kid, I remember my one grandfather, he was, I was like really wanting to start driving, and my, parents were responsibly, being like, oh, we gotta wait till you get your permit and stuff. And I think I was like 14 or 15, and my grandfather was like, oh, he could back my car out and, move it around if he wants. Like, he had that confidence in me, and that, just rocked my world. Like, holy crap. Like, my grandpa, like, really is like this confident that he would toss me the keys, again, maybe crazy, but like, those kinds of things, whether it's a salesman or a loved one or someone, that's confidence and having faith in someone, especially at those young ages, is, I think, really so important and really can make a world of difference sometimes. And Ryan says, my grandpa owned an 04 TSX, and it's by far my favorite car I've driven. 2000s era Acura Infiniti was iconic. I agree. They really made some fantastic stuff. And again, I remember the reviews from back then. People said, oh, well, they're not as good as the European competitors, blah, blah, blah. But like nowadays, I think they're more sought after than a lot of the European stuff at the same time, because it's just, they're reliable. They're not going to take you to the cleaners as far as, ownership costs and stuff. And they had, I think, pretty good styling that has lasted the test of time, I think, in many ways as well. And let me see. Mr. 705 says, I'm a car guy, but I can't afford a fun car. I've been riding motorcycles for 15 years. That's awesome. And I think that's a great way to, again, have that fun at an affordable level, especially these days with affordability being so bad. I think that's a great thing, a hobby for people to switch to, is if cars are too expensive, especially for the kind of performance you want, go to a bike and you get a better experience from what I've seen. I think, again, my holdup has always just been that even if you're the most perfect rider, there's just so many distracted drivers. I think, as we get to this more advanced stage of car automation, it'll make me more comfortable to potentially be on a bike someday if, everything is automatic emergency braking and everything has lane keep assist and everything is, near autonomous. And especially once we get to an autonomous world, then I think it's going to be much safer for motorcycles. And so for that reason, I'm like kind of looking forward to that component of it. As long as, again, we still have the choice to drive cars ourselves. But actually every weekend, I think it's every Saturday morning or Sunday morning, they do motorcycle riding classes in a nearby parking lot. And sometimes I'll drive by. I swear it's like every weekend, there's always a lineup of new motorcycle riders that are hopping on their bike and learning how to, ride a bike and get their motorcycle license. And I love to see it. It's like, without fail, that course is always in demand. And it really gives me confidence that a lot of people are switching to motorcycles. And I think even if you're not an enthusiast, just it's an insanely cheap way to move around transportation wise. This is why we see a lot of other, countries in the world that aren't as well off as us, that are, massive bike culture, whether we're talking, little, moped type things or actual motorcycles. Just, in many cases, it's the better form of transportation in so many ways. And you get phenomenal fuel economy and all that. Just really great in all the ways. Anyway, but I'm glad you're enjoying it, Mr. 705. And I see TFI's discussing the CX-30 Turbo. Yeah, I think they're great. And let me see here. So Danny says, I forgot I saw a second-gen Forester LL Bean edition the other day. Love seeing that when Subaru still did that partnership. Yeah, that was fun. All the LL Beans. Yeah, I think it's a good. I'm honestly surprised they haven't brought that back. You would think with LL Beans boom in popularity and everyone loving outdoorsy stuff, I think an LL Bean edition, maybe LL Bean doesn't want to do it, but Subaru absolutely should bring that back. I mean, that's a no-brainer, easy moneymaker, and Subaru's all about easy moneymakers. That would be so logical these days. I don't know why they ever quit, but especially nowadays, that just, I don't know what they're waiting for. And honestly, I'm surprised like no one else is partnered with like REI and others like that. You would think like a Honda Passport REI edition or something would just completely sell like crazy. But anyway, Vishal says, as of today, I've owned my 24 Jetta for 1 year now. Congrats on the 1 year anniversary. He says, still love the car, and crazy it's been a year already. Time really flies. Absolutely. Glad you're enjoying it so much. And let's see, Steven, the Corvette guy, says, we have a 24 Jeep Wagoneer L Series 2 as a rental this week for our trip. Unfortunately, we hate it, and it shakes at over 70 miles per hour. Interesting. That sounds like just a tire issue or something, because, I mean, a healthy Wagoneer should not be shaken. When I had them, they weren't shaken. So, I'd maybe check with the rental company or check out your tire, make sure that it's safe, because you don't want to have something shaking it over 70. That's that's kind of concerning. So either tire issue, rim issue, maybe it's a bent rim, or maybe some kind of tie rod kind of issue or something. I don't know, but that's not great to hear. Sorry, it's not been a great experience, but that sounds like damage more so than it is intrinsic to the Wagoneer itself. So maybe they can swap into a better one. And let me see. TFI says resale value has a lot to do with perceived reliability and the money people will spend to keep it on the road. If I had a 4Runner, I'd make it rain at the dealership if it's worth MSRP after 5 years. Yeah, I mean, that's why people keep buying them. And it's, again, that self-fulfilling prophecy of everyone has this expectation, and therefore they're willing to pay that top dollar for it. And that's why. We'll see with new 4Runner. For a while there, it seemed like they got off to a slow start with sales. Maybe it was just a production thing. But now, I mean, I see multiple new 4Runners every single week now. They're like really becoming quickly ubiquitous around here. And honestly, I think I'm already at the point of seeing as many new Gen 4Runners as I see prior Gen 4Runners on the road in the past, this summer. They've sold a lot. So, I mean, again, it's another instance where the internet absolutely hates it and, complains about the 4-cylinder and this, that, and the other. But real sales, at least anecdotally, it seems like, at least in my area, there's a bunch of them out there and people are buying them. So, we will see what the sales figures come in at the end of the year here. But I think it's probably another case of Toyota being like, yeah, we don't care what the internet says because we know what's best for our customers and what people are actually going to spend money on. And this is it. And we'll see. And Two-Track Jack, thanks for stopping by. He says a non-turbo version of the Hurricane Straight 6 seems like a no-brainer for something called Cherokee, but I'm not realistic, I guess. I think the problem there is space. An inline 6 is a big engine. I'm not sure exactly, the dimensions of the hood under the Cherokee there, if it's big enough to fit that with accessories and everything. Obviously, with the turbos, you save a little bit of space if you don't need all the plumbing for intercoolers and stuff. I just don't know, especially if they're using a little 1.6 liter turbo motor, there might not be a ton of room under the hood, especially because I think also the thing to keep in mind is this is on the Stella large platform, which is big enough to accommodate stuff like Charger. So you would think, okay, well, that means maybe it should have enough space for the Hurricane motor. But again, this is a platform that's very flexible. I'm sure this doesn't have the same wheelbase as Charger, and it's not going to obviously drive like Charger. So, but the Stella thing means that yes, they can fit gas into it, which is great, but it also means it's set up for EVs. And I think that's part of the hurdle they've had with the Charger is you can fit the Hurricane motor, but can you fit the V8? And the discussion has been that typically you weren't able to fit it. Maybe they found a way to now, but I don't know if it would fit. Maybe they could have tweaked Cherokee and had a long hood on it to stuff the engine in there. But they also don't have any naturally aspirated application of Hurricane. And I don't think Hurricane was ever engineered to be naturally aspirated. I think it was always from the very beginning designed to be turbo. Sure, they could go back and take the turbos off and try and, reformulate it for that. And maybe that's something they will revisit down the road. I think, what you would find, and I could be wrong on this, but I think that, again, they were engineering this car in a world where they weren't sure that, they were going off of, okay, well, we have to be compliant with fuel economy standards. They didn't know it was going to be a free for all here in 2025. And, I'm sure a naturally aspirated Hurricane motor would not be getting as good a fuel economy, and not even close to what you're going to get with this new little hybrid thing. Maybe it wouldn't be super far off. Oftentimes we don't see a giant disparity, for example, with 4Runner and Passport. A little bit of a different thing is Passport's unibody, but that V6 gets pretty close fuel economy to the 4Runner. So it's maybe possible. I just the real big thing, every time someone brings up something like this in these media roundtables that I'm in, if we're in this Q&A session with, Tim Kaniskis or whoever, we're having these kinds of things where we're able to ask questions. A lot of the times whenever you bring up, I were to bring up, for example, why not put a non-turbo Hurricane? He'd say, well, we didn't design Hurricane to not have turbos. And like to them, that's an impossible bridge to build. Like it's like, well, that was what it was engineered for. Like if we were going to do an inline six, we'd have to just engineer an entirely new engine. Like it's always like very binary as far as what they think will work. And, sure, an aftermarket person can take the turbos off and try and retune it. And there's probably a way to do it. But typically, when they engineer stuff, they engineer it for a certain kind of purpose. And they don't like changing that purpose and adapting motors for something so wild as going, okay, this is only going to be turbo, and now it's non-turbo. Like that's like two completely separate engines in their world. And so it's not as easy as just taking the turbos off and retuning it. It's like, well, no, it was engineered for that. The way that they set up the pistons is turbo specific. The way that they designed the oiling is turbo specific. The way they engineer the valves and the springs and all that, they would have to basically just engineer a new engine because everything in that motor is designed for turbocharging. I think that's kind of so then you say, okay, sure, they could put that in a bunch of other stuff. And why don't they have that motor in Grand Cherokee and everything else? And absolutely, I just don't know if everything would fit that because that still is probably going to be a pretty big motor. It could be something they revisit for a next generation, but again, because they are worried about compliance with future EPA standards, because most people are willing to bet that we're not going to have a free-for-all forever with the EPA. It'll probably last until 2029. Once we have a new administration, that might not be the case anymore. And so, again, if they're designing the car today and they were designing for a Trump administration, sure, you could say, let's just go and, have some giant motor and everything and accommodate every engine or every hood to fit that and have, just change all of our styling to fit that and everything. But, again, they can't engineer for that. And if they look at the greater long-term picture, they have to, again, keep in the consistent direction they were headed, which was downsizing and electrification. And we know there's probably going to be an electric version of the Cherokee because it's, again, at Stella platform. So it's more restrictive than a purely gas, platform. And also, I think Cherokee is going to be sold elsewhere. Maybe not, but there's that component as well of Jeep is an international brand. They sell a lot of these things internationally, and so you also have that component of, okay, well, you can't have it have this motor for just America and then put a different motor in for Europe, because that kind of can make things more expensive. You can do it, but it's just, again, the value for them and the cost of, okay, well, now I have to have two separate lines for two different engines. We got to do this, that, and the other. It makes everything more complicated and more expensive. And then you start to cut into the profit margin, and it's this whole domino effect. Again, no one, really sees all the behind the scenes of how the sausage is made, but there's all these things that go into why. And I think, car companies don't do a good job of raising awareness to this. They don't like having people, see the back of the shop in some ways. But I think it's important, because otherwise you just have, people that on the outside looking in, it doesn't make sense. And unless, you've sat through these, hour-long presentations with these executives and stuff, you don't know, all the hurdles that happen and all the things that you need to make happen in order to get this approved for production and make it realistic and all that. So, on the surface, that makes sense. You're absolutely right, Jack. But I'm guessing, if someone did go down that road, they probably came to a dead end at one point where they just weren't able to make it work. That would be my guess on that. Because otherwise, I agree. It seems like something, could be offered at least as an option. And instead, that's not the case. Maybe someday, though. We'll see what happens. And anyway, see, we are over time, so I'm going to try and wrap it up here. I did the last few questions here, try and be fast, and we'll head out. So I apologize for all the tangents tonight, everyone. But your proud dad says, Matt, I've been supporting you since your review of the Chrysler 300C way back then. Also, we want a faster show. I'd love to see a new Taurus show, or if you're talking about anything else, I don't know. But if you're talking Ford Taurus show, I'd love to see that someday. Taurus in general, I think, should make a comeback. But yeah, and thanks so much for the support all these years since the 300C. That's awesome. And I'm so glad you've been enjoying the channel all these years. Thanks again. Let me see. So TFI says, Matt, did anyone talk about Nissan Infiniti yet? And the new Q50? Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier. I think it's all great. I haven't read all the details on all that stuff as far as what's legit and what's actually official and what's just rumor mill. They all make sense and all sound like great ideas. And if that all becomes reality, I think that'll be great for Nissan and Infiniti. And Danny says the N55 was the single turbo, not the twin, for the BMW question earlier. Yeah, so that would mean that was the revised, better motor design. So I think that should be a more reliable setup there, as long as the rest of the car is good. And AAC says, I'm a new driver. What car do you recommend for a first car? I'm 18, so I'm looking to get an older model car. I'll try and be brief with this, because again, this could be a long answer as well. But one of my favorite picks for that kind of a thing is a Honda Civic Si. I love the SIs, and go as old as you need to go to fit your budget. That's the great thing about them is, if you got 30 grand to spend, you can get a brand new one. If you, are on a tighter budget, you want to go for an older model, going for the pre-2015 ones that still have VTEC, I think those are 15 grand and under for even a nice one. I love those ones. Nice light clutch, best shifter in the business, very easy to learn manual on. If you're looking to get into a manual, if you're not, there's other automatic options, but especially for manual people, I think that's a great way to learn manual. It's an easy car. It's a great daily driver. It's comfortable. It's got enough space for everything you need, pretty much. You can have the 4 doors even if you want. That's always my go-to recommendation. That motor seems to hold up for 200,000 to 300,000 miles before you really need to do a whole lot to it, as long as it's been maintained well. I love Civic Si, so that's always my go-to. Lots of other stuff as well. If you want to give me more context, I'd be more than happy to drill down in the future here, whether you want to send me a message. I also do one-on-one car consulting now on my website, mattmaranmotoring.com. If you want to do a one-on-one phone call or video call, more than happy to either come up with some ideas for you or just kind of give you my thoughts on stuff you might be considering already. But if you give me more context, I'm able to give you a better recommendation, because otherwise it's a very wide net of first car, older model for an 18-year-old. There's so many things I could suggest. Scion TC, is another great one. Anything that's Honda or Toyota is going to be pretty safe from a reliability standpoint. There's others that can be just as reliable too, depending on what you're looking for. And you'll have to go older for those kinds of vehicles because they hold their value better. But I'd rather have a Toyota or a Honda that's 5 years older, but probably gonna be a safer bet than maybe a 5-year newer, Hyundai or Kia that hasn't had the maintenance done as well, or something like that could end up, being a bigger headache in the long run. So I'm still a firm believer in a, nice, solid, old, clean Honda or Toyota, probably being a pretty safe bet. But again, lots of good options. Let me know if I can help anymore. And Dan says, what's up, Matt, in chat? Stopping by to say hi. Thanks for stopping by, Dan, and hope you're doing well. And Joe says, in his humble opinion, Audi has some of the nicest headlights and taillights in the game for sure. Extra frustrating when I see one turn without the directional. Yeah, I mean, at least Audi drivers seem to be a little bit better than BMW drivers with turn signals, and Tesla drivers. They also really don't like using turn signals, in my experience. But yeah, and see, TFI, thanks for the correction there. 3rd gen Forester had the 4AT, 4th gen had the CVT. Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. And let me see. So Sean had a TL Type S. That's awesome. And Lancelot says he had a. Oh, I said GR Corolla has to take a drink, right? Dan says you should totally head to Chicago for the Sim Gaming Expo and try your hand at sim racing content. Goes hand in hand with cars. I wish that there was more appreciation for that on YouTube. Maybe some others have cracked it better, but I mean, even real racing and real track driving, I mean, this is kind of a running joke in the whole automotive YouTube realm, is like no one wants to watch track content for the most part. There are some, Savage Geese has done some pretty good successful stuff with track driving. So, some people are lucky to get the fan base for the track stuff, but anytime I post something that's on a track, no one watches it. And then sim racing, I feel like is like even worse, because then it's like not even real. And I'd like to do sim racing. I've always been terrible at it. I actually did a video. I did Project Cars 2. I did the promo for that, and we were at Sonoma and we were driving the sims and driving, in the game. And that was cool. Like, it was actually kind of back to back. We did a half-day driving course in a McLaren 570S at Sonoma, and then we went and we drove the McLaren in Project Cars 2, and it was really cool, but I was horrible at it, even though I'm a decent driver. I've done, I think, 5 or 6 driving schools now, high performance driving schools. So I'd like to think I'm a better driver than the average, driver out there, but I just horrible at sim racing. It's just like, because, in sim racing, you're always on slicks, and being on slicks, if you've never driven on slicks before, I mean, there is no grace. It's like you have grip, and you got nothing, and you're in the grass or the wall. And I've always been not good with sussing out where that limit is, and that's something I don't drive on slicks ever. So I'm horrible at that. They actually the last time I drove on slicks, it's a long time ago in real life. I was able to drive the Hyundai RM, I think it's the RM20. It was the Hyundai Veloster based EV prototype that they had, and this was back on the launch of the Elantra N, the first generation of our first pre-refresh Elantra N. They had the RM20 or whatever it's called out there, and it was on slicks, and we had an autocross course, and I mean, it's an EV too, so EV on slicks is like, and rear-wheel drive and a short wheelbase, bad recipe for stability. But I was doing it was also at Sonoma actually, but I was doing an autocross course there in the parking lot of Sonoma in that thing. And that's the first time I actually had the poor engineer riding shotgun with me. We were going on the autocross course, and I just gave it a little bit too much power. And again, instant electric torque and slicks. So no forgiveness with, grip level. And I actually spun it there on the autocross course. He's like, whoa. And it was fun. I mean, they understood because I wasn't the only one that day who did that. But slicks are not my friend. I need a lot more training to be good on slicks. And that extends into sim racing. It'd be a heavy learning curve. It's also just something I just do not have the time for. And I don't, and again, I don't think I could make a proper YouTube case for it, because it just seems like no one watches that, at least in my world. Maybe there's sim racers that do get great views on Twitch or something, but I just haven't seen anyone have success with track content outside of a few. So, it's a fun idea, but But yeah, it'd be wasted on me because I'm completely I'm out of video games altogether. I haven't fired up my Xbox in probably a year at this point for any kind of gaming. I got video games sitting on the shelf I haven't played yet that have been sitting in the shrink wrap for years. I just don't have the time right now being the parent to a 4-year-old. It's just been a whirlwind of not having personal time and work doesn't help either because I'm usually working here on the channel until about midnight most nights. So it doesn't give me any time to game, unfortunately, but hopefully someday. And anyway, I know we're far over time here. So last few questions here. Vishal said, yeah, Toyota show comment. But he agrees about Toyota covering all the bases. And Hyper Shadow's taking a drink as well. Cheers. And Fook says, which would you rather, GR Corolla or 09 hatch STI if same money? That's a good question, Fook. Because I do love that generation STI. But I think I'd go GR Corolla because I like modern stuff and I like modern safety. Not like GR Corolla is a Volvo or anything, but like, it's going to hold up better in a crash, I think, than an 09 STI would. So that part of my brain, which I know is no fun to talk about, but I think for that reason, a new car warranty, which I still very much highly value. GR Corolla, it's just, I like having that new safety, new tech, new warranty, is why I'd go for GR Corolla over an 09 hatch. And Michelle says, finally remembered my oddball spot of the week, a Mitsubishi Raider. Very nice. That is an oddball spot. Good job. And I see TFI is voting for the STI there. Yeah, and it really is the GR Corolla is the STI that they refuse to make at Subaru. See, Brian saw a Ram TRX today. Very nice. And Tastebud says, I've seen a few of the electric Dodge Chargers around. Didn't think they were out yet. Oh, yeah, they've been out for, I think they went on sale like January or something. So they've been out all year pretty much. They haven't sold very well until recently because now they're leasing them for $200 a month. But before that, yeah, they weren't moving very quickly. And Jack says, all fair points there, Matt. Yeah, I wish they would be able to be more creative with powertrains. Maybe we'll see if they do that at some point. But Cypress Chino says, wow, almost 11:30. You go, Matt. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's fun hanging out with you guys. So the 41 of you that are still hanging in here. And Cypress says Sport Cups are perfect for average Joe track. I'll have to try Sport Cups. I don't know what slicks were on the car I was in, recently with the slicks or in the past, 5 years or whatever. But I'd like to try some more heavy duty track driving someday. And Hyper Shadow says that new car stuff is very enticing. Old cars and their charm, though. I agree. The old cars do have a lot of charm for sure. And that's something I get reminded of every time I do one of these reviews of these older cars. It's so much simpler and it is very redeeming quality too. And I see Matt says, peeps, good night. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Great chat here tonight. Hope you all enjoyed it. Apologies again for the tangents, but hopefully you enjoyed the few little sidetrack stories there and all that. But hope you guys have a great week here. Stay tuned. I'll be doing another live here on Wednesday. And, hopefully this week, we'll see. But I'm hoping to do another junkyard video and debut my new second channel here this week. So stay tuned for that. Those of you who've stuck around till the end here, keep an eye out for that. I'll probably do a member post here on this channel early this week, revealing the new channel name and all that, and hopefully again posting that first video here soon. So stay tuned for that. Should be exciting. Should be good. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Have a great week, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.